All right. Well, I believe we have a quorum and it is 1:32. So I am going to start the meeting. So I welcome everyone here to the May Recovery Council, and I appreciate all of you understanding that we decided to go 100% remote today for safety of people. And hopefully the public will be able to see that. And we do have members of the public that are coming in via Zoom. So I welcome you also on this lovely snowy day. We will introduce ourselves in a second. In the interim, I am just going to briefly go through our very, as always, full agenda. We'll start with the welcome and introductions. We will have a presentation on the prevention work group and some recommendations. Missing from the minutes is approving the minutes. We'll add that in. Then we're going to have a contract update with programming and grants and contracting timeline. We're going to discuss the low barrier shelters. Um, I don't think we're going to have a finance report today. I don't think Ben is coming on board. But we will have a short governance report. We will have a report from the executive committee. And under other business, we'll discuss the urgent funding process. And that is our, as always, ambitious agenda for the meeting. I will remind for those who are new to coming in via Zoom, you can not have to be visual the whole time, but anytime there's a vote, in order to take your vote, we have to see your face. It has to be visual when we do the roll call. Other than that, if you want to not be on screen, you have that opportunity. I'm going to ask you to be patient with me in regards to hands. I don't have a large screen in my home. I just have a small one. So I'm going to ask Chastity, our vice chair, if I miss someone's hand. Chastity, please speak up. And between the two of us, we should be able to see everybody's hand and be able to move forward with that. So, for the sake of everyone, for starting our meeting off, I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself and then tag somebody else to introduce after you. So, my name is Pat Kimball, and I am the chair of the Maine Recovery Council. Welcome. And I'm going to tag Paul.
I'm Paul Vinsel. I'm an addiction medicine physician with Spurwink and the family medicine residency at Central Maine Medical Center. And I'll go to Grayson.
Hi, my name is Grayson. I'm with the Attorney General's office. I am not a part of the council, and I will pass it to Brendan.
Hi, I'm Brendan O'Neill with the Attorney General's office, and I will pass it to Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy Fitzgerald, represent the litigating subdivisions, and I'll pass it to Bruce.
Thank you, Betsy. My name is Bruce Nodden. I'm with the Maine Reentry Network, and I identify as a person in long-term recovery and a person who lives with mental health challenges. And I'll pass it to Liz.
Hello, all. My name's Liz Blackwell Moore. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Public Health for Cumberland County. And I will pass it to Tess.
Thanks, Liz. Hey, everyone. I'm Tess Parks. I'm a person in recovery. I'm the policy director for Maine Recovery Action Project, and I'll pass it to Melissa.
Thanks, Tess. Since you can't read my name, apologies for that. It's not letting me rename myself. If anyone can do that, please feel welcome to.
I'm just going to call you MCA.
It's a cool acronym, but I know people don't love alphabet soup. My name is Melissa Hackett. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a policy associate at the Maine Children's Alliance and the coordinator of the Maine Child Welfare Action Network. Thank you for that. And I'm really here representing children and families who've been impacted in Maine by substance use disorder. I will pass it to Maggie.
Hello, everybody. I'm Maggie McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services for the City of Portland, representing a litigating subdivision, and I will pass it to Todd.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Brackett. I'm the Sheriff in Lincoln County, and I'll pass it off to Holly Stover.
Thank you, Sheriff. My name is Holly Stover. I'm the state representative to this council, and I represent House District 48, including the towns of Boothbay, Boothby Harbor, South Port Edgecombe, West Port Island, and South Bristol. And nice to finally be with you today. I had to navigate this Zoom, and it was not easy.
Happy to have you. Gordon, you haven't gone yet.
No, I'm Gordon Smith, the state's director of opioid response in Governor Mills' office. I'm one of two of the governor's appointments to this council, the other being Ben, who can't be with us today. I want to mention, Pat, at 4 o'clock, I have to move to a phone. So I will be moving, but I still should be available in the last 30 minutes of the call. And I'll toss it. I don't think we've heard from Amber.
We have not.
Hey everyone, my name is Amber Pulsifer. I'm an individual in long-term recovery, and I am also a clinician that works in MAT. And I will pass it to Mary.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Coyne, and I'm the ED for the Recovery Council. I think that's everyone, but
No, we got
no.
Joe.
Chastity.
Joe and Chastity.
Sorry, Chastity.
Go ahead, Chastity.
Hi everyone, Chastity Toole. I use she, her pronouns, and I represent the harm reduction community, and I am in Washington County.
And Joe.
And I'm Joe Everett, the president and CEO of the Opportunity Alliance and a member of the council. And due to the weather, my internet's quite unstable, so I may have to turn my camera up, but no, I'm here and I'm just trying to navigate the internet reality. But good to be here. Thanks, everyone.
I feel your pain. Thank you, Joe. All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us and for the next about hour and a half. And she knows I'm going to stick her to that time frame. I'm going to turn this meeting over to Liz, who's going to share a little bit about our next hour and a half, and we'll have a presentation on prevention. And Liz, just so you know, we're very grateful for the work that you have put into this. And thank you.
Thanks, Pat, so much. Thanks, y'all. So we thought I thought I would give you a little bit of background. It's very brief, but I thought for those of you who weren't here when we were in the last formation of the Maine Recovery Council, that I'd give you just a little bit of background of how we got here, a little bit on prevention, and then Melissa and I essentially have a proposal for you for achieving the goals of the prevention work group recommendations. So, and we've invited some folks who we think you will be really interested to hear from and ask questions of. So, for those of you who weren't here and those of you who maybe just need a refresher because we're doing a million things all at once, the Maine Recovery Council convened a prevention work group last summer. I think we decided to do it in the spring, and we were able to convene that group in the summer. I was the chair of the work group. And the work group was made up of prevention experts from across the states. And they were folks who were working in various parts of the field and also who work with various populations of people. Melissa Hackett was also a member of that prevention work group. And it's how we sort of pulled her in to being part of the Maine Recovery Council. That group worked over a 6-month period doing essentially a assessment and strategic planning process in which we made recommendations on what we thought the priority goals for funding should be for prevention. And those were presented to the council in November of last year. And then they were adopted by the council in December. And during that meeting in December, it was expressed, that there was a need to develop a plan for how we might fund these strategies and to meet the goals. I know that the goals that we came up with and recommended to you all were not easy goals. They're not quick fixes. They're not easy goals. They're long-term, long-ranging prevention strategies that we think are going to make that really were big needs that were unanimously agreed to, and were also things that are we think may have this long-term impact on the problem. And so Melissa and I have developed a proposal for you to consider for meeting the recommended goals. And today, what our plan is to present to you essentially our proposal for how we think the council could fund and do some of this work. And we aren't going to ask you to vote on that today. We'll ask you to think about it. And my hope is that we could then have a discussion and vote on this proposal with changes that you all might want to see happen at the next council meeting. So don't feel like you're under pressure here. We want to give you time to think about this and to hear from the folks that we've invited, and then we can discuss how to move forward. So our proposal includes for each goal considerations for funding, a recommended funding amount, a funding timeline, and then what to actually fund. And we're going to provide this all to you in writing when we're done. But I thought we would just share with you so you don't have too many things to look at once. I'm going to run through some PowerPoint, and we've invited some folks who are experts really and folks who've been doing this work in each of the goal areas. And we've invited them to share with you all examples of strategies or projects that exemplify the goals. We've invited them to share some lessons learned and what kind of supports they think that folks might need to do the work that we are asking people to do to meet the goals. I'm going to start with just like a little brief overview of prevention, very short one. I know you all have, most of you have heard it, but some have not. And so I think it's just important for us to all get grounded in what is prevention, because I think there's a lot of views around prevention and what it is. And so just grounding what the prevention work group really thought, what they think prevention is. So I have a brief PowerPoint here that I'm just going to share. I just need to just trying to navigate my home computer. I haven't worked at home in a long time. Okay, and then I want to be able to see you all. And Grayson, we have folks in who are in the other room, our other Zoom room, that we'll invite. And so I can share with you, well, perhaps while Melissa's talking, I could share with you who those folks are to invite into the room, because they're going to share with us. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that would be great if you just give me their names. Also, you may be able to promote as a co-host. I'm not sure, but if you just give me their names, I can promote them.
Great. Okay. So I'm just going to start real briefly with some, this is our funding proposal. Just briefly, what is prevention? And prevention, we have to understand why and how something happens so we can figure out, and what were the conditions that people were living in, so we can figure out what's best for keeping this problem from arising in the future. So when we think about opioid use disorder and substance use disorders in general, we know there are some key risk factors, and that includes a family history of addiction and genetics. It includes a history of mental illness. Early use of substances is a huge risk factor for later substance use disorder later in life. And so it could be early use of any substance, could be tobacco, alcohol, cannabis. We know that adverse childhood experiences and adverse community experiences, which might include poverty, it might include, traumatic household experiences like abuse and neglect. It could also include having an incarcerated family member. Those all have a way of impacting children and impacting without having a resolving of that trauma. It can put somebody at greater risk for substance use disorder later in life. And then having access to opioids obviously is another risk factor. So when we're thinking about then how do we impact, if those are the major risk factors, how do we address the roots of the problem? And in our prevention work, we really take this whole community approach, that it's not just about someone's individual beliefs or their knowledge, like, oh, I think substance, using heroin is bad. That isn't like enough often for many people for us to do that kind of prevention work where we just share with them the risk of harm. It's really about building and having approaches that impact families and their relationships and impact organizations like schools and workplaces to create supportive and environments for people to live and grow and learn. And it's really about the community and the social norms of a community and the environment of a community. And of course, it's the policies and procedures. Those things all impact a person's risk and the protective factors for substance use. And so we take a holistic approach to that work for addressing and preventing substance use. So examples of addressing this roots, when we're thinking about preventing and reducing youth use, there's SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have the 7 strategies for change. And the first three are really, enhance skills, provide information, and positive youth development programs. Those really impact individuals, and they're great, and we need to do them. But they don't change community alone. So, in order to change community, we have to move towards reducing barriers to vital conditions and enhancing people's access to vital conditions like transportation and housing. We have to change the consequences that people have to support positive youth development. And we have to make changes in the environment for healthy communities and develop policies that really impact those environmental changes. So when we do these strategies up higher in the tree, not the low-hanging fruit, but the fruit that's harder to get to, we really can have strategies that have a long-term impact on communities. So, this was all shared with you all last time. For those of you who were there, and for those of you who weren't, this is also in our prevention work group recommendations. But we also know that it's important to reduce adverse childhood experiences and community experiences and increase resilience. And we also know that it's important to improve behavioral health supports for young people, that these are all part of addressing the roots of the problem. When it comes to, I guess I'll just stop for a second and see if anyone has any questions about that sort of framing of how we got to what are the parts of prevention. So when we got to the strategy recommendations, the group had a couple cross-cutting recommendations, and these were really around time, giving more time. That prevention takes time, so give more time when allocating funding. Making sure there was a strong emphasis on having culturally relevant strategies and work that was really focused on historically marginalized groups. Also, encouraging collaboration and having accessibility funding embedded into any funding that we give. So I'm going to pass it off to Melissa to share with you like the strategy recommendations and then our proposal for you. And meanwhile, I am going to let Grayson know who's in the other room for you to forward.
Thanks, Liz. Will you be able to do that and advance the slide deck?
I will.
Okay, you're magical. Thank you. So thanks, everyone. As you can tell, Liz and I are both really passionate about this prevention work. I feel really proud of the process that went into the development of these recommendations, the time we spent, the information we gathered and sought to understand what the current strengths and opportunities are in Maine to promote prevention and to really invest in it through the use of the opioid settlement funds. So the first strategy recommendation is to support or expand culturally relevant, community-led and youth-led efforts that improve community conditions and communities highly impacted by opioid use disorder. The short version of that is to really look at how we change community conditions, and that really takes a sort of human-led infrastructure approach to doing that work. As we look at the recommendations more specifically, we are talking about recommending $2 million or 50% of the funding allocated if we're using 2025 prevention funding as well. And we estimate that these community coalitions who would do this community conditions work would need between $75,000 and $125,000 per year to do the implementation of this work. As Liz mentioned, you'll hear this cross-cutting recommendation around funding implementation projects over a longer period of time. Prevention takes time, and so we need to invest in the time it takes to do that. We would recommend for this one that we look at 3 to 5 years for using the funding. And then just to share a little bit more background around the considerations that led us to this particular recommendation, this was the highest priority for the work group. There was really broad agreement that this was really important work, and yet it tends to be inadequately funded and supported, and especially as we look across the state. There are existing community coalitions who have a really strong track record of deep community engagement and successful implementation, but we know that that is not consistent across the state. We believe that the coalitions that are already doing the work are really poised well for implementation grants right now. But again, that they don't exist in every community and they might not all focus on high priority populations. So we would really look at these planning grants as well to allow for the development of new coalitions. As we talk about what specifically to fund, it's really about this infrastructure and capacity for changing community conditions. But we also recognize that there are some really important supports that would need to be prepared, would need to come alongside that work. So technical assistance is something we spent a lot of time talking about. This is really nuanced, complicated work. And to do it well, especially for folks who are just starting this work, we believe that that technical assistance will be really important for success. So our specific recommendation is to hire Health Resources in Action to provide that technical assistance to the community coalitions from application through implementation. And we have folks from that organization that will be able to speak with you all in a little bit more detail about that. We also believe that the Health Resources in Action should be provided funding to support the council as we develop an RFP and that RFP process that will really support good applications with the project that are likely to meet the goal. And finally, and most importantly, funding these community coalitions to do the work of changing community conditions. And we believe that it's important that we provide those at 3 different levels for folks who are interested in starting this kind of work, to really have a planning grant process, to have folks who are already prepared, have the infrastructure, but really are inadequately funded to be able to get infrastructure and implementation funding. And then for folks that have been doing the work for a while, but might be able to do more with additional funding, some expansion grant opportunity. The last thing I'll note is that as we talk about some of this wraparound support to the folks doing this work, another thing that we heard strongly from these community coalitions is the idea of a community of practice. There's already an existing community of practice that hosts community collaboratives, which we would say are the same thing as community coalitions, who are doing this community conditions work, and that's a real value for folks to be able to talk through some of the challenges they're having and to learn from each other as they're doing this work. Any questions about strategy 1 before we continue on to the other 2 strategies?
Well, I think, Melissa, we're going to have Ben and Brittany speak to this one.
You're going to have them pause in between. Great, Liz. Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll have, because I think some of this might be slightly theoretical, and I think it's helpful to have it grounded in sort of in the work. And I think we have Ben Wood here and Brittany Chen from Health Resources in Action to share with us some of the experiences they've had supporting communities doing this community condition work. And I think, one of the reasons I'll say we specifically, this work is difficult, and there aren't many people, there aren't any organizations within Maine, and there aren't many organizations who are really supporting this level of work and with technical assistance. And so we've invited them here to share with you some of the work they've done in the past. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will turn it over to Ben and Brittany to share. And I'm not sure, Grayson, can they share their? No.
Yeah.
I don't have access. Oh, wait, yes, I think it just appeared. Oh, no, it's not turned on. Yes.
There you go. There you go. You should have access now.
Thank you. So please, Brittany and Ben, take it away.
Indeed. Let me just make sure this works. But hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here with you all today. Ben and myself have had some really wonderful conversations with Liz, with Melissa, and with Mary to prepare for the conversation today. And we're here to share a little bit about our organization and some of the work that we've done that seems very aligned with what you all hope to do. And we also are here to just hear from you to think about what might be helpful as you are preparing to mobilize around this strategy 1. So again, thank you so much for having us here today. I just want to make sure, are you seeing the slide as it should be? Okay, perfect. You never know, that's always the mystery when you do the share screens. So I'll introduce myself, I'll have Ben introduce himself, we'll tell you a little bit about HRIA, and then we're going to just share some stories of how we've done similar types of work kind of in different spaces in the New England area and beyond. And then we'll just open it up for questions. So that's our flow for today. But just to introduce myself, my name is Brittany Chen. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm the Vice President of Health and Racial Equity at HRIA. And HRIA, just in case you're unfamiliar, is a nonprofit public health organization based in Boston. That's where our office is, but we have staff all over New England and the country. I actually am calling from the Bay Area in California today. And so while it's not snowy snowy as it is over where you are, it is very rainy over here. But I'll stop my introduction for a moment and pass it over to Ben.
Thanks, Brittany. It's great to be here, everybody. My name is Ben Wood, Senior Director of Policy and Practice at HRIA. I use the he series pronouns. I'm over in Western Massachusetts, which really is the Maine of Massachusetts. So I'm sort of there with you all.
Wonderful. So we are here to just talk about how we have supported grant-making processes that have led to prevention-focused outcomes through the lens of equitable community conditions. And actually, a few of my slides are basically repeats of what Liz did, so I will spin through those quickly because you have gotten a really lovely foundation setting from Liz. But just to tell you a little bit about HRIA, our vision is healthy people thriving in equitable and just communities. So the work to kind of advance and improve community conditions is right in our heart, in our wheelhouse, mobilizing community and young people to advocate for the changes that they want to see in their communities. We see that as incredibly protective against any adverse childhood events or any kind of adverse conditions that folks might be dealing with in their individual lives and their individual communities. And so we really do take a community-based focus to advance healthy outcomes. And we, as you can see, our mission is to partner with individuals, organizations, and communities to transform policies, practices, and systems that improve health and advance equity. Very practically speaking, HRIA, as I mentioned, is a public health nonprofit, but we define health very broadly. We really think about all the ways, all the different systems and institutions and places that influence somebody's health. So that's the places you live, work, learn, play, pray, and so on. And so we really do take that broad view, partnering with housing, with the healthcare field, with philanthropy, education, and so on to think about health. Also, just to share, we provide a lot of services in the capacity building arena, grant making, research and evaluation, policy and practice, and direct public health services as well, all with a core vision of advancing health and racial equity. And so I think we bring a lot of the things that you're hoping to do through this grant making process and are excited to share about that with you. So why PSE change? Why are we thinking about improving community conditions? This is really what Liz already talked about. I know that this strategy is to support or expand culturally relevant, community-led, and youth-led efforts to improve community and conditions highly impacted by opioid use disorder. So why are we focusing on community conditions? This infographic I thought was really helpful. It comes right from the report that you all put together from Maine Recovery Council, but it really shows how you might have individual and household stressors, but when that's compounded by environmental toxic stress and community toxic stress, that really creates a hard environment for folks to navigate through. And so we think about community conditions because it provides the protective layers to prevent negative outcomes and support people to thrive. Advancing equitable community conditions or healthy community conditions also is very sustainable. It's something that can reach a large number of folks. It's holistic, taking into account all the full ecosystem in which an individual will interact. And it also really takes the layer of, it really makes you think about a community's history as well as present day context to think about what are the power dynamics at play, what are the historical and present day policies that can hold people back from fully thriving. And it really allows you to take in the full context. And so this is your vision or outcome statement for this particular strategy, that you will see all people live in thriving, interconnected communities with community conditions that promote health and the capacity to make improvements. So I thought that was really beautiful. I wanted to just highlight that. It's from your report as a vision statement. So that is why we think about community conditions. As Liz said, there was the visual of the river, there's the visual of the tree, but basically when we're talking about community conditions, we're really thinking about upstream approaches. And I would say, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the like living conditions, the institutional powers, and the social inequities. That's kind of where we would be focusing on. That really can set the context for influencing risk behaviors, disease and injury, and mortality. So hopefully I'm just affirming everything that Liz just said, and saying it maybe in a emphatic way to help drive the point home. We also want to just uplift specifically that when we are working upstream, we really are thinking about PSE, alphabet soup, policy, systems, and environmental changes. That is where we can start to think about how do we create, how do we start to restructure or rethink the social and economic structures, power and decision making that influences the midstream approaches, the physical and working and living conditions that folks are living within, and so on. And all of that influences the downstream of immediate health and social needs of populations. So policies can be formal policies, big P policies. They can be informal policies, workplace policies. When you think about opioid use disorder and people in recovery, how do you create recovery supportive workplaces, for example, and not just provide like individual support services, which are both really, really important. How do we have all of that work in tandem? For young people beyond the health class, how do you engage them in advocating for the communities that they want to see, engage them in leadership opportunities? Those are the protective factors, the youth development approach that can help support prevention outcomes from substance use and opioid use. And so I'm going to skip this slide because I think we can always go back to it if folks want a better distinction between policy, systems, and environmental change approaches. But I want to pass the mic to Ben to be able to tell a few stories of what we have done in community.
All right. Thank you, Brittany. Hi again. So I hope these stories are relevant and somewhat supportive of the conversations that you all are having and trying to have moving forward. The things that we've been thinking about and hearing you say is that there's a need and a desire to help systems, organizations, this committee, and sort of people generally sort of in the work with you all understand and implement what Brittany is talking about, policy systems and environmental change work. Just get a deeper grounding and have an actual sense that you are bought into that type of intervention. And then the other big one is how to engage in funding decisions in ways that can shift power to the folks who are most impacted by the issues you're trying to work on, and meaningfully support organizations and people to succeed and advance their work and priorities. So how do you actually do grant making and make your funding decisions in ways that are truly supportive of organizations and move beyond traditional grant making practices? So the two stories that we have to share are in that vein. Hopefully they instigate some conversation. We have other stories to share too, if these ones are not totally resonant. But the first one we want to start is this initiative called the Determination of Need and the Community Health Initiative component of Determination Need. In particular, something I was very involved in when I worked for the state of Massachusetts, and HRA has been deeply embedded in since its inception. But essentially, very long story short on this is that in Massachusetts, when there's a hospital that needs to or wants to engage in a large capital expansion, they have to get the Department of Public Health's approval. As part of that approval, there is a requirement to expend resources on a community health initiative. It's the state's way, essentially, of saying that if you want to invest in healthcare, you also need to be investing in community health and the public's health, sort of more expansively. And so this initiative, Massachusetts, raises a lot of money and puts millions of dollars into the community health system in Massachusetts every year. Brittany, you can go to the next slide. In 2017, the guidelines and the whole approach to this project initiative shifted and changed very significantly. And a lot of new requirements were put into place to how hospitals had to think about and use those community health initiative dollars that they were being required to spend. And through a really robust community engagement activity and initiative that happened statewide, there was a big push to ensure that the dollars that the hospitals were spending in this space were going to be pushed upstream to actually do policy systems and environmental change work and move away from individual level intervention and move away from sort of traditional community health programming activities. So a lot of back and forth happened. And one of the reasons why I wanted to tell this particular story is because there's always this push and pull between that individual, I would say the crushing level of individual need, right? Versus the desire to focus upstream and try to stop that need from happening in the first place. And the commissioner at the time, the commissioner of the Department of Public Health, was very much in that crushing individual need headspace. She was a doctor. Her entire work had been sort of in the substance use disorder space and in the homelessness space. And that's just where she saw, that was where her heart was, and she wanted to serve people in that way. So the push and pull that happened in the development of the framework for this program was to how do we center the needs of individuals, but also sort of push upstream to do this policy system environmental change work. So ultimately came up with this social determinant of health framework, which are the 6 big buckets around the particular issues of focus that the commissioner wanted to ensure that were going to continue to be prioritized by hospitals as they were investing these dollars, which includes substance use, mental health, homelessness, and chronic disease prevention. But the guidance that the staff of the department put out challenged the hospitals to think about how do you invest upstream to ultimately, over time, impact those downstream outcomes. Next slide. So this is just one example. Brittany, I think if you hit it again, maybe, yeah, there you go. Thank you. This is just one example. This is from an investment that the Beth Israel Hospital in Boston was required to make. They had a large determination and need project that resulted in several $1 million worth of community health dollars that they had to expend. And similarly to the commissioner, their hospital leadership was very reluctant to invest in upstream initiatives. And it was difficult to develop the buy-in on approaches that were not at the individual level. And so in that back and forth and that sort of that push and pull, it was apparent that for us at HRIA, it was important to be able to demonstrate the possibility of measuring change at different levels along the sort of the continuum of upstream to downstream. And that led to our focus on developing a theory of change, which you can see here on the screen. We thought this might be interesting to you as an example of how to unpack upstream policies of environmental change interventions into its component parts. So this example is related to one of Beth Israel's priority areas, which is rental assistance and an associated evidence-based strategy that was developed, which is eviction prevention. So in this scenario, in this example, eviction prevention was the fundable strategy that they were putting RFPs out around. And so working with the advisory committee for this effort, we helped essentially develop a theory of change to demonstrate how the strategy could have those downstream impacts. Now those downstream impacts can be measured through immediate and intermediate impacts that you can see on the screen. So being able to measure whether or not somebody had increased access to legal services as a result of the eviction prevention program. Being able to measure whether or not residents were kept out of housing court, for example, right? And so being able to articulate at the front end where we sort of could see impacts happening over time to reduce episodic homelessness was a really important and critical component to the process of developing buy-in for all the people who were needing to get behind funding this type of upstream related initiative. Brittany, next slide. Thank you. We've been with the work long enough now that we've been able to measure for them some of the immediate and intermediate impacts that have resulted from their investments. You can see we pulled a quote from a grantee just there, so you could sort of see some of the granularity of an individual's impact as it related to a larger eviction prevention initiative. But really, what I wanted to lift up was a really important nugget that came from the evaluation of this work, which hones in on what we think is one of the most important aspects of doing policy systems and environmental change work, which are co-benefits. So like you all, Beth Israel is prioritizing substance use disorder prevention and behavioral health issues related to their work as well. And we were able, through this evaluation, to help them demonstrate that interventions such as eviction prevention programs led to less interaction with courts, more stability to receive supports from providers, and ultimately did reduce episodic homelessness, which over time is a substance use disorder prevention strategy, right? So helping them connect all those dots at the front end to the development of theory of change, but then actually to be able to demonstrate it through evaluation was critically important. Next example. This comes from our ARPA Power work. So POWER stands for People Organizing and Working for an Equitable Recovery. This was work that we were funded to do by the Barr Foundation in Massachusetts when the American Rescue Plan Act dollars were coming out, and there was a lot of conversation about how cities and towns in Massachusetts were going to use those funds. A lot of churn was happening and a lot of advocacy was happening. And so the Barr Foundation funded us essentially to support local municipalities to increase community engagement practices in those ARPA investment decision-making processes. And so at its heart, we saw ARPA as a possible opportunity to really increase, in particular, resident decision-making power from populations who are routinely and historically shut out of decision-making processes, especially funding decision-making processes. Really saw this as a historic opportunity to advance equity in really tangible ways in communities. So the goals of our work was to support communities to actually increase power to decide, not just to provide input on actions, to normalize actions that demonstrate how government can actually collaborate with residents in more authentic ways, and then to mitigate the harm and any potential unintended negative consequences that may come from ARPA-related investments, say an investment in housing that could ultimately lead to gentrification and displacement, right? So how to go through planning processes to really understand the impacts of funding decisions on populations, even if you think that those funding decisions will always sort of have a net positive or a net good. So our approach essentially was to develop intensive partnerships with communities if they were willing to really sort of develop really comprehensive community engagement strategies so that they could understand how best to work with in partnership with residents in their communities, do a lot of capacity building work. Oh, I will go faster than Brittany. Essentially just to provide as much capacity building support as we possibly could to ensure that the funding decisions that cities and towns are putting out were truly equitable. Next slide. Just two quick examples of how this work sort of played it out. So City of Worcester, this is just a flyer. It's an example of work that we did to support community organizations to be prepared for funding decisions that were coming out from the city. We worked with a community-based organization to host a series of really robust capacity building sessions. Not like these are not bidders conferences, right? Like really trying to draw a distinction between traditional ways that you support applicants in funding decisions to real hands-on support in people's languages that they need them to be in ways that are really about meeting people where they're at and walking through the goals that they have and being as supportive as you possibly can be in the application process. Next slide. This last example is from the city of Everett. We wanted to lift this one up because it's a really great example of a youth empowerment initiative. We worked with this amazing community organization, One Everett, to support their advocacy with the city of Everett, which was very difficult. It was not a partnership in any way, shape, or form. And so a lot of our work was behind the scenes in terms of building the the skill set for youth to engage in municipal level decision making, prepare them for presenting at city council meetings, for example, and those sorts of things. And so the outcomes very much relate to what Liz was describing in terms of building the long-term platform for agency and advocacy that is a youth empowerment priority, in addition to them winning some really tangible results in terms of dollars that they were able to influence related to the ARPA initiative and effort. I'll stop there.
Awesome. And apologies for cutting Ben's story sharing short. It was meant to be a secret message, but he announced it to everyone. I'll just round out with one more story. And this actually will launch us into some of the ideas that we might have for you all to consider if HRA can be a support. One other grant making opportunity we helped design with Boston Children's Hospital was the Children's Health Equity Collaborative. And a lot of what you all are thinking about in terms of the strategy of multi-year, I think you said 3 to 5 years, Liz, I think that was how you presented it. That is really important that we give this work a time for it to take hold. Community conditions work is not short. And so these were place-based collective impact initiatives where Boston Children's Hospital was funding collaboratives to really think about policy systems and environmental changes in like a specific geographical area. And there were 1-year planning grants, and then 2 rounds were actually in the second round of a 3-year cycle. And so some folks have been receiving now almost 7 years of funding to change community conditions. And that is the amount of time that it can take. But as Ben showed in that logic model, you can see points along the way for progress and how that's starting to gear towards the outcomes that you're hoping to see. But the design of this grant making initiative and the design of the other ones that Ben just shared really were intentionally trying to turn a typical grant making process on its head, where we were trying to really think about who are the people who typically might apply and have the capacity to get a grant writer to apply for submit a proposal for a grant making opportunity, and how do we actually think more broadly about how we create the space, build capacity in communities for other folks to be able to come to the fore. And so in this case, we were talking about place-based initiatives focused on policy systems, environmental change. So even in the grant making process, when the RFP was out in the world, we were talking with folks, anyone who was interested, about what is policy systems environmental change. We gave feedback on what some of the proposals were going to be so that folks were actually able to submit competitive proposals when the time came. And so there was like a longer process even in the lead up to doing intentional outreach, using some of the techniques Ben said, but also really building community capacity and helping them think about who might their collaborative or their coalition be. So there was some matchmaking as well that was happening too. And so that's some of the ways that we think about grant making in a very inclusive sense. And this particular grantee, Living Safely in Jackson Square, they were really trying to tackle violence in a particular neighborhood. And it was a really youth engaged and multi-generational approach to build leadership, connection amongst program, and shifting the way that different programs, organizations, decision makers were talking with one another. And it's been a really powerful, and it's still in progress, example. So lastly, what we want to close with is just some of the ideas of ways that we have supported other entities as they've done similar types of grant making processes. I think what's really important just to start is when you are crafting an RFP, a grant making opportunity focused on community conditions, that you all are thinking about how do you understand policy systems, environmental change? What does equity mean to you all? What are some of the examples of what you'd like to see in community that could drive towards that vision that you had laid out in that funding proposal? And then we could also be sharing equitable grant making principles. So there's like a series of conversations that we often have just to create some level setting amongst the folks that will be in the space, the folks that will be helping to craft that. So I assume that would be all of you, just using this as an example, to really think about what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are some of the ways that we could see success, and what would success look like to us? And so there's like a common alignment, and then we can build the process from there. Secondly, designing or reviewing a grant making approach. We can help design, we can help give feedback depending on what is most helpful to you all. But based off of that foundation that has been laid through those first conversations about what your vision of success would look like, what you hope to see, you would develop the RFP and thinking about like the scoring rubrics, outreach strategy, and timeline and approach, but really with the lens of how can we reach those that we most want to engage in these opportunities. And so not just kind of creating a typical grant making process, but asking the critical questions of who is most likely to respond and who might not be likely to respond and why, and is it something we need to address? Advising on equitable grant making principles, getting partner and community feedback. In a lot of these processes, we might design an RFP and get feedback on it before it goes live to see like, what are the barriers that we might be unintentionally putting in place, and how can we mitigate those barriers, and how can we make this as inclusive of a process as possible, for example. Dissemination, of course, really thinking about what is a comprehensive dissemination strategy to reach that vision that you would have set. And of course, the selection process of awardees, and they're like thinking about what is the transparent communication, how are decisions being made, and so on. And finally, as I mentioned, capacity building is a really important part of the grant making process, both in that pre-application phase as well as post-award. So all of these grantees that we were just talking about, or these community conditions projects, there's a lot of partnership alongside through a capacity building approach. And that could be around thinking about how do you do a power analysis? What are the policies that are currently in place in assessing the landscape? How do you think about continuous quality improvement and so on? That's post-award. Pre-award, it's really like, how do you know if you have the infrastructure you need, and how can you set yourself up for success in your application? So those are just some of the ideas. I know we just talked at you for 20 minutes, and so really appreciate your patience. And if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. I know Liz is going to send some follow-up, or I don't know, Melissa or Mary will send up some follow-up information from our presentation as well. But we just want to open it up or see if there's time for questions, I guess. Or Liz, anything you want us to clarify too?
Yeah, I see Paul has a question. Please go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that I didn't get anything out of the 20 minutes, but I really don't know kind of what you're talking about. We have so much money to spend on prevention. Are we talking about now, you're going to, or if this goes this way, you would help us develop grant applications for prevention. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, let me clarify, and actually let me show you this proposal slide again. So what we are proposing, we're proposing that we fund community coalitions. That's the primary proposal, is that we fund community coalitions, and that it would be like some of the work that Brittany and Ben, that you would fund those projects like those projects. But we are also proposing that we fund HRA to help with providing technical assistance to those coalitions, but also with setting up an RFP process that allows for coalitions or other organizations or people in communities to apply to be able to do this kind of work, because it's complicated, difficult work that people may need more support on. And we saw that, Paul, when we did the RFP the first time, there were a lot of organizations or people that would love to have applied, but needed some support to develop, SMART goals. People don't know what SMART goals were, but we asked them for SMART goals in the RFP. So this would be like having HRA be able to provide some of that support to those organizations to then come up with really great projects that will have an impact on their community. Is that clarify?
It's helping. So you want us to fund community coalitions. Can you give me an example what you mean by community coalition?
Sure. Melissa, do you want to, I'd allow you to take, I'd love for, if you don't mind.
Sure. And in the longer slide deck that we had, Paul, we had a couple examples of that. And I don't know if folks will all know the ones that I'm talking about, but I would name like the Community Caring Collaborative in Washington County. So what they really do, there's usually like a backbone organization that pulls a wide variety of partners together to share information with each other from the ground, from the field, what's happening in the community, what information do partners need to know about the challenges that people are experiencing in the community, and then how do those organizations collaborate and coordinate to improve support for the variety of challenges that they're seeing in the community. It's really a human infrastructure piece of like bringing partners together, working collaboratively to address challenges that we're seeing in the community.
So so this place in Washington County meets with people that are actually on the ground working in the community and tries to assist those people on the ground?
I can send a few examples, Paul. It's hard to grab in like a one sentence phrase, especially if you're not familiar with the work, but it's essentially bringing together a broad variety of partners. Someone has to do that, right? Someone makes the space for people to come together and share what they're seeing and hearing. They notice what's not going well, and then they will propose to the group, hey, I'm hearing, for instance, that families in our community are having a really hard time getting childcare. What might we do together to address that particular challenge that families are experiencing? And then they will innovate together to figure out what they can do. Usually those partners are also on the ground and in the field. They just create the infrastructure to bring all those partners together.
I'm not sure, Melissa, who you mean by they. They will get these people together. I'm just really confused about what we're funding.
Can I help answer the question?
Sure, Bruce.
So Paul, in Androscoggin County, Healthy Androscoggin, they convene a meeting it's called LARC, Lewiston Auburn Area Recovery Collaborative. They've been doing prevention needs assessments for about 2 years. They brought the community together around this idea of prevention, harm reduction, and other pieces. That would be a really, really good example in kind of an area that you work in, where Healthy Androscoggin is the lead organization, and they're the ones leading this process.
But they might come up with, Paul, they might come up with solutions that aren't then, like, it's not that Healthy Androscoggin then gets all the money. It might be that other community-based organizations get it, but they're working together to identify what the things are that they need to do to make things better there. And then they work together to do the work. And so it might be so it is complicated. So I can understand why this is like, it's hard to.
HRIA would assist us in building a grant application process for this.
Yes, and then support would be available to support Healthy Androscoggin as they do the work.
Okay,
and
thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
It's complicated. So yeah, I appreciate your questions. That's great. Pat, I see you have your hand up as well.
I do. So I do have a question, because we set aside so much money for prevention. So you're saying to take some of that money and give it to this organization to do it? Or are you asking for additional money? And do we have a budget of what this means? Because I would like to see a budget as to how much was coming out to hire a company to do all this work, plus give the technical assistance to the coalition. So do you have a budget for that?
We did not ask them to develop a budget yet, because we didn't want to put the cart before the horse, right? So we're asking for getting feedback on the idea that we would have an organization help us do this work. Because just as Paul just identified, this is complicated work. It's not a simple, like, here's money to do MAT, or here's money for your recovery community center. It's a little more complicated work, in which we believe, and the work group sort of said, their technical assistance would really, really helpful for that. I think our idea that Melissa and I had is whatever the funding amount is for prevention. It was $4 million last year. If we add to that from this year's funds, that we spend half of it on this goal, and that from within that half of the money, some of that would go to HRIA to support this effort. We are not asking for new money, unless the council wants to put the prevention funds from this year in the bucket. So that's what we're asking for. Maggie, I'm sorry, you had your hand up and I realized
So
that
I just want to just make sure when this budget is clarified, at some point in time, I need to know what would make this different from hiring. We're putting out our own RFP to manage contracts. We have Barry Dunn there doing some work. Is this duplicated services? And I just need to know, again, you don't have to do it today because I know you're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
I just need at some point in time a clarification on the difference of that.
Yeah, that's great. And I can share with you a more formed proposal that HRA has. And it's really not duplication. I mean, they're not going to be writing contracts. They're not working on that. This is really around creating an RFP process that gets us the goals we want, right? This is not about an RFP process, period. This is about an RFP process for soliciting and supporting community organizations to do this work of community conditions. So it's very unique and different. And so I think it is different. So we'll be sure to provide you all with more that you can read and take in on your own time to sort of wrap your heads around that. Maggie.
Sure. Thank you. I just want to say thanks off the bat for the prevention work group for bringing this forward, and HRIA for all the thought that's gone into this. It's really nice to see the thinking behind this kind of community action cycle. I think the thought that's gone into the technical assistance that would be necessary to make this equitable, make sure the right people are at the table, and then that those right people have the tools to succeed is really clear. And so really appreciate how you're approaching that. I guess one thing I'd like maybe HRIA to speak to, one of the challenges that I've seen in the past with community action cycles that are like this is the strength of the process is it can create buy-in, it can create sustainability because more people are involved. But the flip side is communities at time will pick the solution that is in front of them because that's what they're most exposed to. And they don't necessarily have background in other options that are available for them to pursue. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that delicate balance between treasuring and valuing the local priorities that are emerging while also sharing and exposing these coalitions to alternative strategies that have been successful in other places.
I think that's oh, sorry, Ben. I'll just give my first go and feel free to add on. I think it is a delicate balance, as you said. Oftentimes people have their specific idea of what they're hoping to accomplish when they put in a proposal. And I think that's why when you design the planning phase, for example, of a grant, it's really important not to just say, well, how are you going to plan the thing that you're going to do, but how are you going to get additional inputs, whether it be other like doing an environmental scan of what's working in that particular area, topic area in your community. What are aligned efforts that you might be able to engage in so that you might be able to leverage and build a broader coalition or partnership with those that you're working with. And so in that assessment, and then also the capacity building that we've provided in some of these processes to be able to help broaden the conversations, both for a specific proposal, or specific grantee, and also bringing them together with other grantees to build kind of a broader network of ideas and thinking. And so I think there's obviously going to be, when you do a proposed RFP process, there might be a specific thing that folks are excited about. And I think we always try to build in time for assessment and a more thorough planning process before implementation starts, so that folks can kind of iterate on their idea, build upon it, and bring more folks to the fore. So that's maybe my initial kind of process perspective. But Ben, did you have anything that you wanted to share as well?
I'm actually going to jump in. I'm so sorry. We have 2 more goals to get to in a short period of time, and I am mindful that we have folks who have questions. I'm wondering if it's possible, that we leave some of these questions to the end, or you put them in writing for us here on the side in the webinar, in the chat, and we can get to them. I apologize. We have other folks who are waiting to share their about the other goals. Gordon and Amber, are they quick questions, or are they ones that you think you could maybe put in the webinar chat for us?
It's a comment, Liz, and I can save
great.
it till the end.
Okay, thank you. And Amber, sorry to cut you all off.
I can put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much.
Just a reminder, when you put things in the chat, the public can't see it and it
Okay, well,
doesn't go to recording. So
okay,
just remember
I'll
that.
write that. I'll say them out loud, perhaps.
Thank you.
Brittany and Ben, I'm so sorry to cut you off. I so appreciate all your time, and we will make sure to get you some of questions and provide with the whole council some of the reports that you all have provided to us. Thank you so
Happy to be here,
much.
Liz. Nice to meet
Keeping
everybody.
time. Bye, everyone.
So I'm sorry to cut that short. We also want to make sure we get to the other two goals in our hour-and-a-half time frame that we have. And so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen really quickly here. And Melissa is going to move us through strategy 2.
I'm going to thoughtfully and expeditiously move us quickly through this so that we can get our partners to join us for conversation and questions. The second strategy recommendation is to increase 2-gen approaches to prevention with a focus on families who've been impacted by opioid use disorder and or families who live in communities that have been highly impacted. Our recommendation around the funding amount is $1 million or 25% of funding allocated if also using the 2025 funding. Again, we would recommend that this funding be stretched out over a longer period of time for it to actually be utilized and implemented, 2 to 3 years here. And then just for a little bit of background in terms of the consideration for this funding, we know that there are really successful 2-gen projects that are happening on a small scale across the state. So this funding could be focused on replicating and expanding projects. The speakers who are going to follow me can share a lot more about 2-gen, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time speaking to that. I know it's a term that might not be as familiar to everyone, but they are really the experts that can speak to that in a little more detail. This funding could also be used to enhance existing community partnerships or projects that are currently focused on children or families to bring them toward a more whole 2-generation approach. So we also recognize the prevention work group talked about specific priority geographic areas or populations, including mothers, people who are providing kinship care, and BIPOC communities. And again, as we get specific about what we're talking about funding, we would suggest that there's an RFP process that prioritizes these 2-gen projects in geographic or demographic areas that don't currently have access to these kinds of projects. We would also suggest that we would consider statewide projects that are focused on high priority populations. I'm sorry that's so fast, but I know we're running short on time and I want to leave plenty of time to bring our speakers in and have them share and you be able to ask questions.
Great. So we have Jean Cousins and Jen Beck in the room with us from John T. Gorman Foundation. So I'm going to pass it all over to you all.
Hello, everyone. Would you be able to give us permission to share screen? Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Beck. I'm Vice President of Programs at the John T. Gorman Foundation. And today I'll be co-presenting with my colleague, Jean Cousins, a Program Associate at the Foundation. First, we want to thank you for this invitation to present to you today. We are really excited about the prospect of prevention strategies being advanced with a 2-generation approach. Today, we've been asked to give a brief overview of what is a 2-generation approach, share a few examples of 2-gen initiatives that the Foundation has funded over time, and then some overall guidance on the types of technical assistance and supports that we have found organizations to find helpful in doing this work. Before we jump right in, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Foundation, the John T. Gorman Foundation is a private foundation based in Portland, Maine. However, we serve the entire state. The mission of the Foundation is to make Maine a more equitable place where all children and families can thrive. In 2023, the Foundation embarked on a new 5-year strategic plan with a primary goal to increase the prevalence of Maine children who are resilient and ready to succeed. As a foundation, we are privileged to have the resources that we do. However, the types of issues and challenges that we are seeking to find solutions for are complex and deeply entrenched. And as a result, those solutions usually far exceed our resources. So when we were looking into developing our current strategic plan, we looked at the prior 10 years plus of work that we had supported so that we could identify what aspects of our approach had been most impactful. What we determined was that our resources had the greatest potential for impact when we focused on prevention and when we had applied a two-generation approach. There is a wealth of information out in the world about what is a two-gen approach. We're going to share just today a few key features so that you can have a grounded sense of what this can look like. And then Jean will share a few examples of some projects that we've been involved with. So I will share my screen. Oops. All right. Are you able to see this? Yes, I can't see anybody.
That's actually great. Thank you. It's working well now.
All right. So, first, I just want to begin with there are a number of ways to refer to a two-generation approach. Two-generation approaches reflect the many shapes, structures, and sizes of families. So you sometimes will hear the two-gen approach be referred to as full family or multi-generation. At the foundation, we use the term two-gen, and that's largely because we draw heavily from the Ascend network at the Aspen Institute. Ascend is a national leader and expert in the two-gen field, and as you'll see here today in the slides, we've pulled some information from their website as a resource. So a two-generation approach is one where children and their caregivers are being intentionally and simultaneously supported on a pathway to whole family well-being. The two-generation approach recognizes the interdependence of children and caregivers and recognizes that overall well-being can be stymied if the whole family is not being taken into account. As we all know, children do as well as their caregivers, and caregivers do as well as their children are doing. Two-generation approaches are, by definition, comprehensive approaches, and programs and organizations can come to two-gen work in different ways. Looking at this graphic on the left, I'll just give a couple of examples of the different ways that programs or organizations can be considered two-gen. So on the left, we might have an organization or a program that is typically child focused. So let's say a childcare program. They can begin moving closer to kind of a true whole family approach by introducing parent and caregiver elements into their programming. So this might be a childcare program that introduces parenting workshops or family literacy programming. On the right side, we would have an adult focused organization or program, maybe a workforce training program or a community college program. That program or organization might typically focus entirely on adults. And as they move to integrate whole family or two-generation approaches, they can start introducing these child elements into their programming. So, for example, a workforce training program or a community college program might introduce on-site childcare or a family study room so that parents, students can be working on their courses while their children are in the room with safe educational toys to play with. In addition to thinking about two-gen along that pathway that we were just looking at, another key feature of the two-gen approach are what are known as key components of well-being. We can think of these components of well-being as the types of supports and services that families need to thrive. So these components include economic assets, access to high quality early care and education, post-secondary and employment pathways, access to physical and mental health services, and opportunities for social connection and social capital. As we'll see in the next slide, you can think of these components of well-being almost like gears. So in order for a family to thrive, these gears need to be in sync and need to be able to be moving. So if one gear it gets stuck, the other gears will be impacted. Here I'm just going to show one example of how families might experience these different components of well-being. So here looking at economic assets, we could have a family of three, a single parent with two children living in subsidized housing with limited economic assets, and those limited economic assets might limit their ability to move to a space that better meets their needs. Here with the education components, this would be an example where the gears are working well. So one child is enrolled in Head Start, the other is in the first grade. And then here we have an example of where one of the components, there could be a need for this family to have more support. So the parent has limited job prospects. They may have their GED and would like to enter onto a post-secondary path, but maybe feeling overwhelmed with how to do that with two young children if they are lacking childcare access or have limited transportation. Just in terms of kind of the importance of these components of well-being, again, it's important to think about kind of what components are in place for families and where might additional supports and interventions be helpful so that those gears can all be moving in sync. That was a really quick overview. I know you're getting a lot of information today. I'm going to now turn this over to my colleague Jean, who's going to share a couple of examples of the work that JTG has been supporting, and then we'll wrap up with some overall lessons about what we're learning.
Thank you, Jen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for inviting us to be here today. As Jen said, I'm going to share a couple of examples of initiatives that the foundation has supported. One you may be familiar with, it's pretty closely linked to supporting families that are impacted by substance use disorder. And then I have a couple of examples to share that look a little bit more upstream and look to address root causes. So I'll give like a quick description of the area of concern and then how the foundation worked in partnership with organizations to design and test a strategy. So the first is Macaulay Residence. Many of you are likely already familiar with Macaulay Residences and their programming. For those of you who may not be, it's a comprehensive transitional housing program for women with and without children who are working through recovery. And they've been providing services for many years in Portland and in Bangor. Currently, 25 women are served at those locations. We know from research that completion of treatment and sustained recovery is significantly tied to employment. And a couple of years ago, in conversation with staff at Macaulay, we learned that as part of graduation from the residence, women were encouraged to pursue employment or post-secondary pathways. And at that time, the majority or perhaps even all of the women were pursuing employment. And many women were going directly into the service industry where they were
getting low wages, and there were sort of poor prospects for advancement in that industry. So we understood that, a couple of those cogs in the wheel were not really turning for those women at the residence. So that presented an opportunity for the foundation to think with Macaulay staff about how to provide support around academic advancement for residents. So success coaching was implemented at the residence, where that was exclusively focused on academic engagement. So coaches worked with women to help them understand their learning style, complete the high school equivalency test, build skills for mastery of content, and enroll in higher education. At the same time, partnerships with SMCC and EMCC were established. EMCC even offers classes on site at the Bangor location. And it was that collaboration between Macaulay residence staff and the community college staff that really created this safe process for creating a learning environment that was sensitive to recovery. It was also grounded in a 2-gen approach. So, for example, learning together opportunities are offered at the campuses where women and their children can visit and engage in 2-gen programming. So, Macaulay residents went from, almost no women enrolling in post-secondary and higher ed opportunities to now achieving 100% enrollment for women that are eligible at the Portland location, and very similar results in Bangor. I think we have just a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to talk about Maine moms, and then I might not get to our third example today, but happy to share that information in another way with you all. So Maine Moms is a partnership with Bangor Housing, DHHS, and Yale's Elevate Policy Lab. We know that perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are the most common complication of pregnancy, and that if left untreated, these conditions can negatively impact outcomes for both mothers and their babies. We also know that perinatal mood disorders and substance use disorders are very closely linked, and that they can worsen each other. And that in Maine, there are significant barriers to accessing mental health care for women experiencing perinatal mental health disorders or concerns. One significant barrier is stigma. So with this in mind, the foundation began to explore ways to deliver low barrier and evidence-based supports in community. So foundation funds were used to access training and technical assistance from Yale's Elevate Policy Lab to implement their evidence-based model, which is called Mental Health Outreach for Mothers Partnership, or MOMS. And they also have a MOMS stress management course. And then a partnership between the Maine Department of Health and Human Services and Bangor Housing Authority supported staffing for the pilot project. So there are group sessions that take place over a number of weeks in the Cape Heart community, and these are co-facilitated by a clinician and a community mental health ambassador who is also a mother in the neighborhood. And the overarching goal of Maine Moms is for participants to acquire skills for mood management. And these skills have been shown to decrease stress, depression, and anxiety, and other mental health related symptoms. And improving maternal mental health creates opportunities for improving parenting strategies and developing better coping mechanisms. And we also know from research that it can lead to increased workforce participation and productivity. And so 3 cohorts have completed Maine Moms in the Cape Heart community, and we're seeing some really promising early results. We're seeing potential pre to post improvements in perceived stress and in perceived social support, and we're awaiting all data collection, but we're seeing positive trends toward decrease in mood symptoms. And we'll be super excited to share more on that when we have more data available.
So
That's
I
great,
think
Jean.
that's, yeah, my
Well,
time.
well, I'm wondering if we can, you all have a lot of experience and you have a lot of expertise that you could share with the group. I think the goal here is that we have John T. Gorman to lean on for some understanding of what we could be funding and some lessons learned. So we'll share with the whole council some of the lessons learned that they have for us as we move forward with putting forth an RFP. Our proposal, Melissa and I are proposing that we put forth an RFP to fund additional projects like the ones they've spoken to. So we have one. Thank you all so much. I think I'm going to go to the last one and we'll come back for questions.
So
I think we
Liz,
have till
I just
3:10.
want to remind you, you only have about 10 more minutes
Great.
because I
So
need time to make crucial votes.
yep.
So you got about
And
10 minutes.
and we have 10 more minutes with one more goal to share with you all. Jen and Jean, I'm so sorry for the quickness, and we appreciate so much you coming and sharing, and we'll make sure to share this on with the group. And we'll come back next month if folks have additional questions along the way. But the work you're doing is really great, and we so appreciate you coming to help us in this effort.
Thank you for this invitation and thank you all for the work that you're doing.
Our last bit is on this is on the final goal. And if you remember, our final goal was to increase funding and evidence-informed efforts at the state and local level to prevent and reduce high-risk substance use among the 18 to 25-year-old population. And I will say that one of the considerations that we had for this funding is that Maine CDC has done this work, has really previously done a lot of prevention work with this population. That funding has ebbed and flowed over the 20 years I've been doing this work, and it's currently in an ebb space where there isn't a lot of funding, but there is the knowledge and capacity to do the work with additional funding. And there are local NPN partners, Maine Prevention Network partners, who are funded by Maine CDC, who have the capacity to do some of this work at the local level with, whether that's with colleges and universities or workplaces or other places where 18 to 25-year-olds are. They have the capacity to do it if they had additional funding. So we are recommending that we fund $1 million or 25% of the allocation, and that we allow for spending again over this longer time period, at least a 3-year period. And we're proposing to really give the funds to Maine CDC and to have Maine CDC be able to hire a staff person to facilitate a strategic planning process and statewide prevention efforts and provide guidance at the local level on this work. And that local prevention efforts happen through the Maine Prevention Network, and that the Maine CDC has an application process for local NPNs to implement strategies. So briefly, I think we'll just have a five minutes. I'd love to have Megan Scott share with you just a little bit of the work. She's from the Maine CDC, and we'll be able to share with you just a little bit of their work and capacity to support this effort. Megan, I'm looking for your name to promote you. Here you come. And maybe Megan, I mean, if you need PowerPoint, it's fine. Or if you want to perhaps just speak for a couple minutes about your capacity at the Maine CDC would be great.
Okay. Hey, here I am. So I will let me take a look at my notes here and see cut out a little bit of it. So I guess I'll just so again, I'm Megan Scott. I'm the Substance Use Prevention Program Manager at Maine CDC. So I was asked to come and talk to you a little bit about some of the work that we do at the state level, and then what we do at the local level and how we fund that, and how adding this work could enhance some of the work that we're already doing and also expand our reach. So I don't know, Liz, if you want to share the slides that I'll just skip right to that stuff.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I don't have them pulled up this second. Do you want to keep talking while I find them?
Sure. So I have Liz will pull up a slide that just kind of shows my my team at Maine CDC. So we have, a lot of work happens through the Maine Prevention Network, but my team of 7 that you'll see in a second does oversee programs and projects outside of that network that enhances our reach. You have my 7 staff for either contract or limited period positions. And, for example, some of our state level work includes supporting responsible beverage seller server trainings and compliance checks. We're currently piloting screening, brief intervention, referral to treatment, or SBIRT, in 6 school-based health centers. We support 5 overdose prevention coalitions and 19 community level mini grantees that are working on small 1-year prescription drug misuse prevention initiatives. We're supporting the expansion of the Sources of Strength program in middle and high schools. Gateway Opportunity is a youth employment program, and the Student Intervention Reintegration Program, that's a restorative approach for students ages 13 to 18 with a substance use violation. And as you will see in a second, most of my staff manage a federal grant. But what's not reflected here is the Substance Use Block Grant, the ARPA funds, and the Fund for Healthy Maine funds, which I manage. And so these federal grants support our state level work and the substance use prevention work of the Maine Prevention Network. But these grants are all competitive, and they come with time limits and their own priorities and requirements for funding, which kind of goes back to what you've heard today, which makes that goal 1 really important, because we are often limited by the age groups that we can work with and some of the strategies that we can do. I'm sure Liz will share these with you, so if you wanted to take a look a little bit more about how our work is broken up. So then the next slide, Liz, is the Maine Prevention Network, also known as MPN, is the state level prevention structure to fund and support local level prevention work. The structure is fairly new, and it officially launched in January of 2023, so we're just 2 years in. It's a 10-year contract. MPN uses a collaborative strategy to address substance and tobacco use prevention and control, healthy eating, active living, youth engagement, and then a few of our mass reach health media communications campaigns. And so this slide kind of illustrates the variety of partners that make up Maine Prevention Network, which also includes evaluation, different Rink is our media advertising, sorry, and then all the different organizations that are contracted in each public health district. And then to illustrate it a little bit better on the next slide, I see that MPN is broken down by public health district, and this map illustrates 8 of the 9 districts. And District 9 is currently managed by Wabanaki Public Health, and it's not assigned one single geographic area, but rather represents the whole state. And so this QR code here, when you get the slides, can take you to contact information for all the different organizations. So I guess, so work focusing on the 18 to 25-year-old population is, really important to our team. We obviously touch this age group with some of our work, but we haven't had a real concentrated effort or plan due to a lack of available or allowable funding, and also because it's really the hardest group to reach. If they're in college, they could be challenging to reach due to the level of campus willingness or capacity to address substance use issues. And if they're in the workplace, where do we start? So a couple years ago, we did do an assessment of workplace substance use. And so we do have an idea of, where some of the highest risk industries are. Work with colleges in the past has mainly happened through the Higher Education Alcohol Prevention Partnership, and that was funded by a grant from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. But that ended several years ago, and there wasn't state level funding to kind of sustain that work. But our training vendor recently subcontracted with the former coordinator of that group, and she's re-engaging with colleges right now to kind of assess what they might still be doing from the past, where they're at currently, kind of maybe what the appetite is to do some substance use prevention or restorative policy change on their campuses. So we have kind of started this work with the hope that we can expand it. We're also working on an assessment of the impact of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders in Maine, which will naturally lead us to work focusing on people of childbearing age. We've created a toolkit to work through with employers, especially those that employ the young adult population. And we're also currently trying to recruit at least 2 college health centers to bring into our SBIRT pilot. So all this to say is that we have pieces of the work that already touch this population, but as this group consistently has the highest use rates, especially for binge drinking, capacity to focus more intentionally on reaching this age group is really needed. Maine CDC is poised to lead this work, and Maine Prevention Network partners with increased capacity are situated perfectly to carry out the work at the local level due to their expertise and their ability to address the unique needs within each of the communities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megan. That was great. Really great. I'm wondering if folks have questions or for Megan, for us, for total, we have 4 minutes. I promise, Pat, we will be done, but I would love to hear if folks have questions or thoughts.
Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, Gordon, please go ahead.
Um, I was just going to comment that I'm, and this goes to all the 3 presentations really, that anything that's going to take weight off of our 2 staff people and leaves it with people who have expertise to help us would be seen, in my opinion, as a huge asset. And so while I don't know, for instance, the health resources in action group, that would just be huge if they're willing to take on pieces of this, because you're going to realize in the next 90 minutes here that, just any one of our other remaining 3 pillars, any single project, they are labor intensive things. So that if we're really able to feel that, based upon the tremendous work that Liz and Melissa and others have done, that Mary, it doesn't have to wake up every morning and say, oh, okay, the prevention piece is over here. It just would be a huge asset, in my opinion.
I just want to say what an amazing hour and a half. Thank you, Liz and Melissa. Amazing. And so many shovel-ready projects, it seems like, that we really need to get going in these times that we're in. So good job. It was very, very impressive. So thank you, everyone who participated.
Thank you. Yeah, Paul. Oh, you're muted, Paul. I still can't hear you.
Real quick, Megan, you mentioned that some of these were federal grants from the federal CDC. Realistically, can we count on any of that money?
So our funding actually comes from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. We have not received guidance. My understanding is that potentially we might have to modify some of our priority populations. We do have a grant that focuses a lot on the LGBTQ plus community, so we suspect that we might have to kind of change gears on that a little bit, which is very upsetting. But we have not received any formal guidance from them yet on implications of some of these executive orders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So given the
ahead.
time that we're done, and I just want to say, we have this proposal in obviously PowerPoint presentation, but we also have it written up as a Word document. So I'm going to send it to Mary right now so you all can have, and we'll hopefully have time on the next meeting to really discuss. If you have questions or things you want us to come prepared to answer that what got brought up for you today, please send them to me and Melissa, and we will make sure we won't answer them right away, but we'll bring them to the conversation that we have in the future. I appreciate your time and energy to listen in and do this. So thank you.
Liz, it'd be helpful in preparing for the next meeting if you would actually draft motions that precisely direct what you've asked us to do, and that would help speed things along.
Great. I love that idea. Thanks, Gordon. Thank you so much
Liz
for your
and
time.
Maggie, and everyone for doing that. I know it was I pushed you on it. We just have stuff to do, but it was very informative and I'm really appreciative, and I will send my questions to you after I read that proposal. I will not be at the next meeting, at the March meeting, but I will certainly review it and give my feedback. So, all right. All right, next on the agenda is a quick one. The next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the January meeting. You've been sent those. If you have no questions or concerns or edits, can I hear a motion?
Motion to accept the minutes.
It's Bruce motion to accept the minutes. Did I hear a
Seconded.
second?
Seconded.
Gordon seconded. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, can I ask you, Grayson, to please call a roll?
Yes, of course. Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Holly Stover,
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
I believe that's a yes, if I can read lips.
thank you, Tess Parks. She's still on here?
Yes. There she is.
Oh, there you are. All set? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Their motion carries. I thank you very much. The next item I will turn over to Mary. She is going to discuss the contract updates, planning and grants motion, do some motions there, and also talk about contracting timeline and the process. Thanks, Mary.
No problem. And thank you, Liz and Melissa, for helping to pull together that presentation and for everyone who joined us. I'll echo what many of us have already shared, but that was very informative and also great to just be able to hear a little bit more about the work that's already being done and how the council can hopefully adopt that in the next couple of months. I am just pulling up some motions that I have outlined to make sure I don't forget. And most of them are aligned with the contracts that we've been working on. Two of them are we need a couple changes for the planning grants that we awarded last fall for Franklin County and Androscoggin County. So I'm actually going to turn this over to Gordon because he believe has the motions already written up and is ready to share those. So Gordon, if you don't mind starting there, that would be great.
Sure, you can pull them up if you want on the screen, but I'm prepared to read them. They're not long. These are the planning grants that we previously approved in on April 11th last year and October 29th. April 11th was the one for Franklin County. October 29th was the one for Androscoggin County. Those of you with us at that time will remember these were $1.5 million grants that were approved initially for detox beds. And then when the need for detox beds changed, and there was also no parties in those counties ready to stand up a freestanding detox facility, we then repurposed those monies through motions to send $1.1 million to Milestone. That was from the
Androscoggin.
That was from the Androscoggin one. That was the October one. And in April, we repurposed funds, $1.1 million to fund Tessa's House, the women's residential and detox program in the town of Washington. Hopefully they'll open in March or April. That left $400,000 in each of those counties. And we offered that to them to do a planning and assessment project, do a planning and assessment process with the two very established coalitions in that area. There's two reasons why we need to amend these motions. In the motion made actually for Androscoggin County, we erroneously still left in the $400,000 with a reference to detox beds. We meant for that to be for a planning and needs assessment, just like we had done in Franklin. So it was simply an error. And I took on the drafting of these contracts. And in doing so and working with the parties, I realized that was an error that needed to be corrected. The other reason to do the amendment is that because both of these established coalitions, and they're both part of the Maine Prevention Network, by the way, they've already done quite a bit of needs assessment. So what they really, in fact, Muskegon County, I've got it down here, they did a very nice 3 to 5 year strategic plan earlier last year. So what they really need to do is update those and find what the contemporary priorities are for that. And it would still leave them some money where they could actually implement a project, at least begin a project. And so we started talking about, well, sure, if you get through this process and you've identified a project and there's still part of the $400,000, we'd want you to start that working. But we also need to know what the project is and need to approve your project. So the first motion, for instance, is just a motion to amend the April 11th, 2024 motion allocating $400,000 over 2 years for planning and needs assessment contract with Healthy Community Coalition in Franklin County to now include the opportunity to implement a project determined to be a priority during the planning and needs assessment process. The identified project must receive approval from the council or one of its committees in order to use any funding remaining after the assessment and planning process. The other motion is the same, except it corrects the error of that $400,000 going to detox and makes clear that it's going to a planning and needs assessment contract. But it also includes the ability to implement a project, but we have to approve it first.
So there's
those are the motions, and I can make them together. We can do them separately. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have before we vote on the motions.
Gordon, before I forget, because I can't write that fast, could you send me the motions?
Yeah, Mary has them.
I will send them to you now, Betsy.
Thank
Also,
you.
Gordon, can I make a request that we have them as separate motions? And that
they have to be separate.
Help
For
streamline it
contracting purposes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a lawyer and I don't necessarily agree, but I want to move this along. So let me, shall I make the first, are there any questions before I make the first motion, which will be directed to the Franklin County project? Okay, I guess I should move it again. All right, I move that, the council amend the April 11th, 2024 motion in which we allocated $400,000 over 2 years for planning and needs assessment contract with Healthy Community Coalition in Franklin County to now include the opportunity to implement a project determined to be a priority during the planning and needs assessment process. The identified project must receive approval from the council or one of its committees in order to use any funding remaining after the assessment and planning process.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or question on the motion? If not, Grayson, could you call a roll, please?
Brendan came off mute. Okay.
Sorry, I can't. Yeah,
Okay.
I can't find. I wasn't fast enough at raising my hand.
Oh, okay.
In terms of the motion, the only part of it I wonder about is the or a committee, because I don't think a committee can act on behalf of the council.
No, it can only make recommendations.
So, I mean, if you're okay, Gordon, like I would just remove the reference to the committees.
Okay, I was just trying to get it efficiently done, but sure, after the word council, I will strike or one of its committees from my motion. Are you agreeable, Betsy, as the second?
I am indeed.
Okay, thanks, Brendan, for that correction.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded and amended. Do I hear any other questions? No hands. Grayson, can you call a roll, please?
Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Bruce Naughton,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Holly Stover,
Yes.
thank you. Joe Everett,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Todd Brackett.
Yes, if you can hear me.
Wait, I can't.
Can.
Des Parks.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. All in favor, motion carries. I thank you very much. So
I'd like
then,
to make the second motion, Pat. And I remind you that none of this is new money. These are 2024 actions that we took. It's the same money. I think you understand. I'm going to move that we amend the October 29th, 2024 motion allocating $400,000 to detox beds in Androscoggin County to now allocate those same funds in the same amount to Central Maine Community Health, doing business as Healthy Androscoggin, to support a planning and needs assessment contract, including the opportunity to implement a project determined to be a priority during the planning and needs assessment process. The identified project must receive approval from the council in order to use any funding remaining after the assessment and planning process.
I second that.
it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or questions?
No, but I'm reminding one member of the council has a conflict of interest, I think, and needs to recuse themselves.
Thank you.
My only comment is it's funny how much different a lawyer's motion is compared to everybody else. That's a whole mouthful.
Chastity, isn't it? It's crossing those trees and doing the eyes. All right. There's no other discussion. Grayson, will you call a roll, please?
Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden,
I'll have to abstain.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Holly Stover,
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Tess Parks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries with one abstention because Bruce Nodden identified that he had a conflict of interest with the motion. So I thank you very much. That passed. All right, Mary.
Fantastic. We have one more sort of housekeeping motion and vote that needs to take place. Grayson, when you have a chance, if you could please pull up the Barry Dunn proposal that I shared with you for the council to review, that would be helpful. So in looking back at some of our motions, when we approved Barry Dunn's second sort of contract with us to provide services specifically around the contracting process. As many of you will remember, they first came on to help us specifically develop the grant application. When we made that vote, it was as an amendment to their original contract, which has since expired. So they no longer have a contract with us. We will need to, I believe, vote to amend the vote that occurred in November to instead reflect the council engaging in a new contract fully with Barry Dunn with a contract start date of March 1st. And that will span 5 months. That will go through June or July. And these deliverables are not new. These are very similar to what was already shared and we voted on back in November. I have also reviewed these with Tim Cutler at Barry Dunn, and they are very comfortable providing this support to us. Again, as interim support while we pull together the RFP so that we can have a vendor provide longer term support for us. So this is just, again, 5 months and specifically around the contracting process for our grants. They initially, when we had spoken to them about providing additional services, it was for a 2 to 3 month time frame. We had initially voted on 22,250, I believe, as their contract value. excuse me, 22,950 as their contract value. After speaking with Tim about increasing the time frame and also, reviewing these deliverables again, they have proposed 25,000 as a total contract value, which is a very marginal increase from what we have already approved. And especially given this will be an additional 2 months, I believe it's a very fair request, and their services were very crucial during the grant application process, and they're wonderful to work with. And so I hope that today we can again vote to amend the original November vote and to adapt the proposal as presented here today. Before we open it up for a motion, does anyone have any questions?
I didn't catch the new dollar amount, Mary. I'm sorry.
The new dollar amount is 25,000.
Okay.
Yep, and the contract term would be March 1st through July 31st. And when I spoke with Tim, I let him know that many of the services for this new contract would probably be front loaded, and he was very comfortable with that, and said they had the bandwidth on their end to provide that support.
Do you have the precise language of the motion that you'd like?
I do not.
So would we be amending? We can't amend you say they have no existing contract, right?
They do not, no, but we did have a vote to add an amendment to their contract back in November. And so Brendan, you may be able to weigh in here. I was of the impression that we did have to address that November vote, but if we don't need to and it's now null, we can just start a new motion. The big things we need to make sure to include are the contract term, the total contract value, and to accept the deliverables and scope of work as proposed in the document that was just shared.
Well, I'll throw something out there and Brendan can edit it just so that we can move this along. And don't take it down yet, Grayson. I'm practicing. So we would move to do a new contract with Barry Dunn, with the deliverables as just reviewed by the council for a period from March 1st of 2025 to July 31st, 2025, in the amount of $25,000. Brendan?
I think that's fine as long as I think that's fine. I have in the back of my mind that there may be an administrative way for us to simply amend the contract, even though it has ended. So could you just add to that to amend or enter into a new contract?
I move that the council amend the existing Barry Dunn contract or enter into a new contract for them to perform the deliverables in the contract in the document reviewed today for a period of time beginning March 1st, 2025, ending July 31st, 2025, in an amount not to exceed $25,000.
Second.
I hear a motion and I hear a second from Bruce. Further questions or comments before we take a roll? If not, Grayson, can you please take a roll?
Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Holly Stover,
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Tess Parks.
Thank you very much. Motion carries. They do good work for us, and that'll be nice to have that contract extended. Thank you very much. Mary, you have, I think next is contracting timeline and process.
I've got a couple more contract updates.
Okay.
Yep. And then Pat, if it works for you, I think the committee reports, at least the executive committee report, would be good to do after the brief contract updates, and then I'll jump into the contract timeline and process a little bit more.
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I'm very happy to share that Milestone's contract has been finished. That was sent out for Pat's signature and also Milestone's signature yesterday. So we will have their full contract amount sent to them and that payment processed by the middle of March. I've been going back and forth with Tom Doherty quite a bit, and they're very grateful for all of our support, and that we were able to prioritize and expedite that process. So thank you all for your support in that. And Gordon played a very crucial role in helping to draft that contract, as well as various folks from the state who I met with for licensing and all of that. So I want to share that and again express thanks on Milestone's behalf as well. Liz, Melissa, and I had a wonderful couple of meetings actually over the past 2 weeks with really focus groups essentially to help us start to develop the contract for the whole family service funding. Again, that was allocated back in December. Liz or Melissa, if there's anything specific that you would like to report out to the council, please feel free to do so. Right now, we are engaging the three of us in discussions around what next steps look like. And again, I'm just very appreciative that we've been able to convene these experts to help us better understand how these whole family service programs and coaching programs work so that we can have a more informed contracting process and make sure that we are working in partnership with these organizations and that the funding is being allocated as it was initially intended. Melissa or Liz, if you have anything, jump in, but if not, I'll keep
I want to
moving.
keep moving us along. I just want to say gratitude for like people who've suggested, hey, these are folks you should talk to in the allocation of these flexible funds. We've really been able to tap some expertise with folks saying, I would suggest doing it this way, not this way. We really want to make sure that we can demonstrate the impact and that the organizations receiving the funds can use them most effectively for families. So just a lot of gratitude for the folks that have suggested connecting with certain folks so that we can really put a good process together.
Yes, I echo that completely. Thank you, Melissa. The other prevention contracts, again, back from December, Mayan's contract is at the 90-yard line. It is essentially finished. I've been working with Beth over the past 2 weeks to wrap that up and gain some clarity around just some final more administrative pieces more than anything. There is one more administrative component that I have to figure out with her, and then that will be ready for signature. And that funding will be distributed hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I anticipate again that we can have that contract finalized by tomorrow or early next week.
Peter, where is that, Mary? Sorry, where is that again?
The Mayan contract?
Yeah. Okay. No, I just didn't understand. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry if I'm mumbling. I'll try to enunciate too a little better.
Okay. Ears.
The other prevention contract for the Peter Alphon Foundation, Brendan and I have met. We recently met with Adam Burke, who is their executive director. There was a couple points in really a couple terms in that contract that we've been going back and forth about. You know, their board had a chance to review it, and Brendan has been working with his office to provide some additional clarity and explanation. We are working to set up another meeting with Adam, hopefully next week, to provide the next round of updates. And then after that, at least from my perspective, we should be moving into the final stages of really wrapping that contract up and working to ensure, again, all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Brendan, I don't know if there's any other updates or additional information you'd like to share, but if so, please chime in.
In the interest of time, I'll say no, but I'm happy to answer questions to the extent that I can.
Great, thank you. And those, again, those contracts, there's nothing that we need at this point from the council. And if there is, I will bring any questions to the program and grants committee. But we've been able to move through those discussions internally. And again, we're in a good place with those. So I expect the Peter Alphon Foundation contract will be finalized here in the next couple of weeks.
We are moving. I love it.
Wonderful. So those, oh, and I want to say that all of the SSP contracts have been finalized, which is wonderful. There was a couple that again, from an administrative standpoint, we had a few things that needed to be wrapped up, but we just received our last final executed document for those SSP contracts. And so I want to thank the AG's office and all the support they provided to get those through the door.
And Mary, just to make the point that that's somewhere north of $1 million for harm reduction that's gone out.
Mary, I'd like to report on my 3 briefly.
Please.
So I was just waiting for the motions to pass today to finish up the two contracts for Franklin and Androscoggin. Contracts are really done. I just need to fill in the gaps this weekend and plan to have those finished next week. Tessa's house, I'm pleased to say it's in the hands of their lawyers, and they've been a little longer getting back to me than we expected. I talked to the principals on the board yesterday, and I said, I thought they'd be back to me by now. But the nice thing, we're not holding up anything. Their lawyer is supposed to get any edits to me, and that we really want that property to open. They'll open first with the residential beds, later with detox, later in the year. They should be able to open in the spring. Thanks.
Gordon, can we touch base about the planning grants?
Sure.
Just in my capacity, working in the AG's office on some of the AG's grant making.
Yeah, you'll get my copies before the parties do. You'll get the first. Okay. You'll get the draft this weekend, and then when you tell me they're okay to get to the parties, you've seen most of it.
And it's not on the kind of legal issues. It's on some of the other issues.
Yeah, no problem.
You will get first refusal. Chastity has her hand up.
I want to go back to something Brendan just mentioned when he said a little over $1 million went to harm reduction. I was reading an article recently about where money's gone all over the country, and Maine actually led the way with the largest share funding harm reduction, and that's just really, really cool to see.
That is really cool. Good for us.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thanks for sharing that, Chastity. And also for all that the council's contributed to be able to be the leader in the work that we're doing and supporting.
Mary, I just want to flag for everybody that at least I'm grateful for my colleagues in the AG's office who are on the administrative side to help move these contracts forward and the funds out the door, which I and the council wouldn't be able to get this work done, and who are sort of transforming and taking on this role that is not a traditional role in the AG's office. And at least from my perspective, I'm grateful, and I think they've done an amazing job. So thanks.
Thank you, Brendan.
As someone I like once said, it does take a village.
It does. Maybe now's the time for our first MRC press release. I'll get on that. I'll put that on my.
Well, I can tell you the press is listening in, so I can see your name up there.
But Mary, this leads right into your presentation about contracting.
It does. I'm wondering if we should finish the motions though first. I think that would be a good use of time right now. Pat, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, didn't we finish that motion?
We do, but there's a motion from the executive committee report.
Oh, sure. We'll do that one.
And we also need the program and grant committee report for those two motions and votes for the low barrier shelters.
Okay, you
Have
want
to
to
be
move on to that for the low barrier shelters one? Is that the one you want first, Mary?
Either one works. Yep.
So let's go with the low barrier shelters. The Programs and Grants Committee, I will turn that over to Joe. He is the chair of that. And that committee had a recommendation for the full council in regards to the low barrier shelters.
Thank you, Pat. And thank you, Mary, for your great work with that as well. Mary coordinated with Preble Street around Elena's Way, I think, and Hope House. Is it Elena's Way? And Mark Swan and Allie Lovejoy came and visited us from after um, Mary had presented their answers to questions the council had about their project and sort of where Hope House was at. And I think Mark reported that they're 7 days into the ownership of Hope House. So it was a great conversation. And there was a unanimous recommendation from the P&G meeting to recommend that the council recommend that we fund those programs that were just paused, as you remember, during the round of grant awards that we made in December. Anything to add, Mary, to that?
And just to remind the full council that we had tabled those two applications so that we could gain some further clarity around how the transition was working as Preble Street took over ownership from PCHC of the Hope House operations. We, again, were able to have some of our questions answered, and the Program and Grants Committee, unanimously agreed, as Joe mentioned, to recommend that the full council does officially approve those applications. I have no reason to believe that there's any other doubts or questions that we have. Their application was very thorough, and again, the Program Grants Committee had a couple weeks to look through those applications. We just need to formally and officially vote to provide that funding.
So on that note, I guess I would make a motion that we fund Preble Street and their new projects per the conversations during the December meeting and the most recent Program and Grants Committee meeting. And I'm not Gordon, I'm not as good as him, so if I'm missing anything, let me know, Gordon.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any
It's been
questions?
moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that motion?
Joe, can you just fill us in on the amount of the grant funding?
I would have to ask Mary for the precise number. I think it's around 1 million, maybe, for the both the shelters.
It is. I'm just pulling it up. Sorry.
Yeah, it was Paul, it's the exact amount that Mary will get it for us, but it's the exact amount that was on the application. Nothing has changed since that application was reviewed and scored.
There's two applications.
Yeah, there's two of them.
Hope
There's
House
one
and
for
I
Preble
think
Street.
Mhm. And
Preble Street.
I think together they're slightly over $1 million, maybe. I could be a little off.
They're slightly over. So Preble Street's application was for $683,760. They applied under the recovery support pillar. And then Hope House applied for $478,632, also under the recovery support pillar.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And Pat, just to clarify for kind of legal reasons, Joe, is your motion to fund the two separate applications at the amounts that they have requested?
Yes. And I was thinking, Brendan, do we need to do separate motions because they were separate proposals?
We voted.
It's cleaner to do it that way, but
Didn't we vote in groups for all the other grants?
yeah, I mean, the November grants were done as blocks. So
could this be considered the low barrier shelter block?
I'm not too worried if they're together, just as long as there's clarity that the dollar amounts we're talking about are specific to the amounts that each requested.
Okay, so Mary just placed Hope House and Preble Street. Hope House is 478,632. Preble Street is 683,760 for the record.
So that's been moved and seconded.
And are these intended to be one-time payments or are they multi-year?
So these we are treating as the other, similar to the other grant applications where most of them are 2-year grants with a year one installment and a year two. We didn't specify the payment structure in any of the other votes, and I would recommend we don't do that now because I haven't had a chance to review their budgets.
Thank you, Mary.
Any other questions? If not, Grayson, could you call a roll, please?
Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Holly Stover,
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Tess Parks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary, what was next?
Next was also thank you to Preble Street and Hope House for your continued
Mhm.
patience and congratulations on that being official. They have hung in there with us, and I just want
Yeah.
to say that out loud. The next thing would be for the executive committee, for the chair to report out for the recommendation on the coordinator position. So Pat, I believe you're the chair.
I can do that. So the executive committee met and interviewed. We reviewed applications, and we then chose to interview. After the interviews, we discussed and came up with a final recommendation. All of the interviews and were done in executive session. We came out of executive session to announce our vote. Our vote was unanimous that we hire Elizabeth, is it Fortier? I know there's a French present. Is that how is it?
Fortier is the English pronunciation.
Fortier is the English
That's the way
pronunciation.
she pronounces.
To be our recovery coordinator. I believe that Mary has sent to all of you her resume. If you have any questions, please let me know. She has, upon your approval, she will accept the position at a contracted rate of $40 per hour. And the contract will be for 1 year. And there's a max based on that contract that we have to do, and I can't find my cheat sheet. You got it, Mary?
Yes. So the total contract value, and that would be for 40 hours a week, it would be $83,200. And in addition to it being a 1-year contract, the recommendation includes a start date of March 10th, 2025.
Any questions about her start date, about the process, about Elizabeth herself? All right. If I have no questions, then I'm looking for a motion, and I'll tell you the motion has to say that we are taking the recommendation of the executive committee to hire Elizabeth Fortier for her contract date of March 10th, 2025 to March 10th, 2026 at a contract rate of $40 per hour with a contract value of $83,200.
Can you just say the position?
Recovery coordinator, council coordinator.
I'll move for that.
If Paul moved it, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Holly seconded. Do we have any questions or concerns? If not, Grayson, will you call a roll?
Amber Pulsifer,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Abstain.
Paul Vinsel,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Holly Stover,
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Yes.
Maggie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Melissa Hackett,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Tess Parks.
Yes.
And could I just quickly confirm who seconded that?
Holly Stover.
Holly Stover.
Thank you very much.
All right, the motion carried, so thank you very much. And you will all hopefully get to meet Elizabeth at the March meeting in person. So we now officially have 2 staff people. I'm telling you, we're just like, we're just moving and grooving here. All right, so that's the report from the executive committee. Do you want Paul to do his governance committee, Mary, or do you want to move on to the rest of
No,
your?
let's hand it over to Paul.
Okay, Paul is going to do a brief report on the work of the governance committee.
All right, so the government, thank you very much, Mary and Pat. The governance committee met on January 30, 2025. We decided ongoing meeting schedule that the governance committee would have meetings on the 4th Friday of the month between 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. by Zoom. And actually, Grayson, I sent you the agenda for the next meeting, and I put it 1 to 2. Can you please change it to 12 to 1?
Yes, I will fix that. Thank you.
First thing we discussed was public comment at MRC meetings. We felt that at the annual public forum, there was quite a few people felt that we should have increased access to public commenting at the meetings. It was noted that we do currently have the ability for the public to comment by email, though we don't all necessarily see those emails. We also discussed that right now that the council really has to stress on getting these contracts out. And so the amount of time if we could even have any time in the MRC meetings for public comment in the next couple of months is very questionable. But after that, hopefully we can do that. There was concern of how to manage if the public comments become that we would have to have rules that they are respectful and courteous. The moderator would have to have the ability to stop the comment if the guidelines aren't followed. And we all thought that there would probably be about a 3-minute limit for each comment. And we haven't decided yet whether we're going to stop people at 3 minutes or let them finish their sentence. We also discussed how would the MRC respond to comments, whether that would be one person's job to speak for the MRC, or would each of us be able to reach out to the person and not speak for the MRC, but talk about that comment or ask questions about it. What we have decided is I'm going to write up a proposal for public comments. Mary's going to help me with that. I will send that out to all of the members of the governance committee, and we will discuss that proposal at our next meeting on February 28th. We then had a little bit of talk of bylaws review. We didn't make any changes or advise any changes. We then talked about annual public forums, and everyone felt that it would be very difficult to have the whole MRC available for more than one public forum a year. But we talked also about the possibility of having 2 to 3 MRC members at various meetings in various parts of the state, and whether we could leverage community recovery centers for these little group meetings in different areas of the state. So that's something else we'll be talking about at the next government committee meeting. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Before I forget, and I will send this out over email so that this is not the only time I'm sharing this information. I've spoken with all the committee chairs, and we have now a set schedule for when the committees will meet. So as Paul mentioned, governance will be the fourth Friday of every month. We're going to have program and grants meet the first and third Tuesday of every month. And that way we still get to meet twice a month, but instead of alternating every other week, we can make sure the program and grant schedule aligns better with the full council meeting. We're going to have finance meet the third Friday of every month. So we'll have program and grants and finance meet the same week. And then the executive committee, we've talked about an as needed basis or potentially the last Monday of every month. So having governance and executive also meet the same week. But that way we do not have program and grants and the full council meeting on the same week. So quite a bit of time for all of us and work. So if we can distribute it and have the scheduling cadence flow a little bit nicer, then that would be appreciated. So I'll send out those new scheduling dates. And also if it's helpful for anyone, feel free to email me and I can send you a hold for the calendar invite. I know some folks are used to making their own recurring calendar meetings or looking at the website, but if it would be helpful for anyone for me to do that for you, I do it for myself and can easily add you on.
Right. Thank you. And Ben is not here, so we will not have a finance committee report. And so I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Mary and the items that she has left on the agenda.
Great. Thank you, Pat. I know there's a couple other things that we want to get to, so I'm going to try to keep this to 20 minutes or so. Todd.
I'm sorry, I'll be brief.
No worries.
Is the governance committee interested in suggestions on public comment, or you guys just?
Absolutely, we're
Yes.
interested in suggestions. And Todd, feel free to email me any
Cool, I'll do that. Thank you.
Yes, anyone that is familiar with that type of, I know that some of the county commissioners do it, some of the town offices, anytime that you have something you think will be helpful, we'd love to know what that is and just filter them through Paul.
Great. So this was not new. This will be a bit of a recap for some of you, but for folks who are not on the program grants committee, we will be posting that meeting to our YouTube channel tomorrow. But we had a really informative and productive meeting on Tuesday of this week, where we started to review a little bit more about the grant contracting process. But more so, we also invited all of the grantees to join us and have conversations about any questions that they may have about the contracting process in general, but also specifically around the standard contract language and the terms and conditions that we shared with all of them in advance of that meeting. And that was also included in the packet of materials that I shared with all of you prior to this meeting. We sent out a survey about 2 weeks ago to all of the grantees, just asking them if there's been any part of their project that's changed since we made the funding award back in November, or since they, or any changes from when they actually drafted and completed that application earlier this fall. We also asked folks what their current funding situation was like, knowing that there's a lot of changes happening right now at both the state and the federal level, and that some organizations are relying on council funding in order to just maintain their operations, and are at risk of losing substantial funds if our money cannot get to them at a certain time. So through that survey process and also from reading some of the applications, we were able to learn a little bit more about which organizations we see as high priority. And I say that recognizing that all of these are a high priority, but knowing that we only have capacity to move through a certain amount of applications at one time. Are there some applications that we know we need to get on right away, and others where they have a little bit more flexibility and leeway to wait, let's say, an additional couple weeks or month for funding. That conversation was, again, a really wonderful time, I think, for all of us as a committee to just talk openly about where we're at with this process and make sure that line of communication was open and clear. I know some of the grantees really appreciated being able to ask questions and receive feedback about their questions in real time. And I also have a list of follow-up questions that I will work with Brendan to either address or provide more information and context around that came out of that discussion. I do want to emphasize that the discussion was around the standard contract terms that are in Rider B of the contract. That doesn't, the Rider B isn't important. It just means, hey, these are the standard Maine Recovery Council terms that we have adopted and that Brendan and his colleagues at the Attorney General's office have worked extensively to help us develop. As you all know, the Attorney General's office is a third party to all of our contracts. And so ensuring that when we are ready to actually obtain those signatures and hand something to the Attorney General, that we have more confidence that it will check the boxes they all are looking for. And it will also protect us as an organization and for the Attorney General's office as the state. There's been a couple more questions that I've received from grantees following that conversation. And I want to just say out loud now to both anyone listening and to this council, if there are questions around our standard contract terms, please email those to me directly. Those conversations will happen between Brendan and myself, and I will work with him to respond to grantees individually. If there are certain provisions in the standard contract terms that the council as a whole would like to see addressed, those will be conversations that we take up in the Program and Grants Committee. Again, knowing that our time is limited and we are trying to move this process forward. If we do have to go back and make any changes, either holistically or on a case-by-case basis to those standard contract terms, anytime we need to do that and require input from the Attorney General's office, it will take us time and it will cause delays. Again, that's not to say nothing can be changed, but it is to say there isn't a ton of liberties we can take at this point because we have already worked closely with them to see, again, what sort of the minimum threshold is for us. But if you have questions about those or would like further clarification, please bring those to me. And if you receive any questions about those from grantees as well, I would also ask that you include me in those conversations and share my email with them so that I can make sure we're relaying the correct information about what those provisions mean. I'm going to give you
I just have to say the nicest thing, one of the nicest things on there was when it was Bruce's idea, we invited them all to say something and introduce themselves. Every single one of them almost said what a pleasure it was to work with Mary, that she was open, she'd answer questions, she was flexible. It was really, she represents this council very well with those grantees, and it was very nice to hear. Sorry, Mary, go.
No, thank you, Pat. I appreciate it. It was really wonderful to also have an opportunity to hear everyone's feedback and to see faces and connect faces to names and get to know these people a little bit more and to have everyone in the same room together, even if it was a virtual room. I think that went a long way for me. And I think that's something, again, the Maine Recovery Council has the opportunity to facilitate and promote in many ways. So right now I'm going to pull up, I'm going to share a quick PowerPoint with you all that just review some of the information I provided at the Program and Grants Committee meeting. Am I in the correct mode? Does that look fine? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, great. Last time I was in not the right mode. Thanks, Bruce. So here's a brief overview of what the anticipated timeline looks like. Again, I don't have enough information. Yes.
Sorry, the slide is, at least on my screen, the slide is blocked by a pop-up called Give Subtitles a Try.
Oh.
Yep.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. Um, so this is just how I am looking at the next couple of months. Again, a more concrete timeline will be shared and I'll develop as we start working through some of these first contracts. But really, my focus for February and also into March is for us to begin developing these contracts and specifically around drafting the deliverables. As I spoke about at our last council meeting, the work that Brendan and the Attorney General's office have done so far to support this process has been so critical in allowing us to develop what those standard contract terms are, and those apply essentially across the board. Again, there could be case by case basis where there's a change, but those conversations I will have with grantees. The council, what you all will be doing and helping with it is to look at the purpose of using each of these funds for the specific project, that you've been assigned to look at. And what you all will be supporting is the drafting of the deliverables, which is a fancy way of saying the scope of work or the purpose of the funding. The beauty is we have grant applications that are thorough and robust and provide more information than we probably need for us to really be able to develop those deliverables and keep the contracts moving. And what Brendan and Grayson have helped do is create a standard contract template where we've highlighted exactly where you all have information to fill in, and you also see what information you can't change. So it really is as straightforward, I think, as we could possibly do it in this sort of process, and involving folks that we know, don't necessarily have expertise or experience working and developing contracts. The contract template, I understand, and I can approach, and having not had much experience with contracts before that, I hope you all feel okay getting into that. That is what February will be focused on again, and March. Once the contracts are developed, and I'll on my next slide show you how I've kind of grouped them. What we'll do is start to engage in discussions with the grantee specifically. So when you all help support the development of the deliverables, you won't really be speaking much with the grantee. If there are specific questions, by all means, you are welcome to do that. But it's really points of clarification, and that was part of the intention of sending out this survey in advance of involving more council members, so that we had that information in advance and I could share it with you all. Again, just to keep the process moving forward as smoothly and as quickly as we possibly can. My guess is that it'll take everyone a different amount of time to develop these contracts. Some folks, Gordon, for instance, has offered to help support 15 of them. So things will take time, and will also require good communication between you all and myself around what type of support I can provide. I'll work with you to make sure we're keeping track of things. I'm not giving anyone a recommended timeline or deadline as to when I need these by, but I do want you all to know sort of the general timeline, so that you can keep it in mind as you support the drafting or really any part of the contract development. My hope is that by the end of April or May, we can have the first batch of contracts ready for signatures. We need to have the grantee sign first. It will then go to Pat, and then it can go to the Attorney General. That order is pretty essential, so I wanted to make sure it was highlighted. It will also take, I'm anticipating at least 2 months between when the contract is signed and when we can say it's been fully executed, the contract has started, and a payment can go out. So I want to set that expectation, sort of level set with everyone now, that it will take a fair amount of work just to get these contracts developed and ready for signature. But there is an entire back end process that, again, the Attorney General's office is really stepping up to help support us with. But there's elements of that process that we don't have control over, nor can we really be that involved in. And I've had multiple conversations with the finance director and the AG team to understand what that looks like, so that we can then say, okay, knowing we have at least that 6 to 8 weeks of processing time, what can we do before then to support the contract development, and also make sure we have been realistic about our timelines. Up until now, we've been working on contracts in sort of a one-on-one basis and learning about how to do this in real time. And now that we understand the process, there is also, again, 45 now grant applications that we need to move through, and that's quite a significant administrative lift, not only on our end, but also on the Attorney General on the state side. So I just want to recognize that we can move as quickly as we want to, but there is still a timeline and a process that we have to follow. When I spoke with the Program Grants Committee in January, I heard back from a couple members who had the time and availability and interest in helping to draft these deliverables. The way that I've looked at this is trying to categorize our contracts into group A and group B. And I want to say up front, this isn't necessarily group A is prioritized over group B. This had to do more with the actual type of project, which council members could be involved in helping to draft the deliverables, what the ease of implementation looked like, where they were in the timeline for their project, if it was a current project that's already operating, if it was a startup, and whether or not they were comfortable with the terms and conditions that were previously shared with them. Because again, if there are further conversations that need to happen, happy to engage in those, but the timeline will look a little bit different, and I'll need to plan ahead for that. These are the council members, again, who are kind of assigned to these groups, and I will share the actual grant assignments with those council members tomorrow. I do want to say that any council member is welcome to join this process. We're starting out with the Program and Grants Committee because that committee has really been leading the process for getting these contracts out the door, as they did with actually developing the grant application in the first place. But I will say, if you have no conflict with any of these organizations or these projects, and let's say you reviewed one of the applications, then it would be really wonderful to have you just give us an extra set of eyes to ensure that the deliverables that have been drafted also match your understanding. I'm looking at you all as sort of providing the content and the subject matter expertise and review here. And then after the contracts are drafted by you all and with your support, I will then work with Barry Dunn to help make sure that we can translate what you've drafted into sort of standard legal language and contract terminology before that is, reviewed in sort of a final sense, and before that goes to any of the parties for final review and signatures. So this is, again, not set in stone, but it does allow us to at least sort of wrap our heads around 20 projects first, and then start to look at the other set of projects after we get some momentum and our feet on the ground a little bit. So what I've done here is and I'm sorry if it looks a little bit more overwhelming than I wanted it to, but I understand, again, we've been able to develop this contract template to share with you all to help try to make it as streamlined as possible. But it's still difficult to even know where to start or how to begin drafting and filling in the blanks, essentially. So what I've done is I've created sort of an annotated version of the standard contract template that I will send out to anyone who's providing support in the drafting process. What I've tried to do here is just start to walk you through it. Initially, my comments, as you see, are the ones in red. So when you do receive your materials, you will receive your assignments. You'll receive this annotated version of the contract template, as well as a standard template version that you can then fill in. You will have a link to the grant application. So you'll receive all the grant materials. You are welcome to read it, to read and review all of them. I actually would encourage you to do that, but you may not find all of them useful for the actual drafting of the deliverables. So what I've tried to do is highlight which elements of the grant will probably be the most useful for you, especially as you just get started. So jumping over to number 3 here, the introduction and overview. I would recommend that everyone start with reading the project overview section, which is the first question of our grant application. What you're being asked to do after that is just jot down the bullet points and notes. If you want to write it out in full sentences, great. But if you really want to just capture what the essence of this project for here. Again, we have Barry Dunn now officially on board to support finalizing and reworking any of the language as needed. So it's really, again, capturing the essence of this project, and that's what you all are here to help with. As you go through these applications, I do want to say that, there are some terms that you will see over and over, and this terminology may be commonplace for us, but it may not be for other folks. So what I would encourage you to do is write down any terms, words that are specific to that project and also specific to this field, because we will need to define those. And it would be really helpful if you all could call some of those out while you're drafting, because it's just harder to do once it's all been said and done, to identify all of those again. To identify all of those terms and then also to make sure they're consistent. So I would ask that you just try to jot things down as you move through this. The deliverables, again, is really what the nuts and bolts of this all are. This is what I'm trying to get your support with. And to draft those, luckily, our application asks folks to outline the SMART goals and their project activities. We also asked for a budget, which was great. All three components of the application, all three of those components will provide a really useful starting point. And in many ways, we've essentially already asked the grantees to outline what their deliverables are for us. So they've made your job now really as straightforward as it can be. What I've done here is just kind of called out a couple things that I found to be useful as I've learned how to draft deliverables. I think deliverables doesn't give you much information about what's being asked, but instead look at this as, what is the project for? How are these funds intended to be used? And what is the project trying to do? What goals are we attempting to achieve? That's really what the deliverables are. Nothing more, nothing less. Something I will ask is that as you're going through this, try to be as detailed as possible. More detail is better. Less is not better here, less is not more. It is much easier for me to work with Barry Dunn to pare down the information you provide than try to add to it. Again, just the more information, the better, keeping those sort of key pieces of information in mind of, okay, does this actually relate to the project's intended scope of work? Does this actually apply to what the funding is trying to achieve? Or is it additional information that probably doesn't apply here because it's not, it doesn't need to be included in the contract. I also want to emphasize that try to make the deliverables, even just your notes, as clear and specific as possible. The more specific, the better. And something that I will be looking at all of these contracts for is how specific the deliverables are and also how enforceable are they. So try to keep that enforceability component, I guess, in mind as you're going through this, and maybe ask yourself, if you can't enforce this specific, note you've added, is it a deliverable, or are there ways in which you could add additional detail, expand upon what you've written, or if you need, just highlight it and say, hey, Mary, I need some help trying to understand how to reword this. Again, happy to do that, and I will be doing that. But just some things to keep in mind so that you know what to be looking for as you're sifting through these applications. I also want to emphasize or mention to you all that there's a performance measures piece, which is in the deliverables sort of rider A that you all will be receiving. You do not need to try to develop the performance measures. Again, we've already asked folks to include those. So if you could do that, that would be helpful. Just jotting down any evaluation components or criteria that have been noted in their application, that would be great. But that piece of this, I will also be going back and reviewing, and I will be looking not only at each application specifically, but I'll be looking at each kind of group and category of applications to make sure that we're asking for the same performance measures, across all of the recovery residences or recovery centers, so that we can ensure our reporting down the line it's not only accurate, but it also gives us meaningful information to assess the impact of these projects. Sorry that I just talked at you and put so many words on your screen.
Mary, it's
Mhm.
Chastity asked, and I think others may want. Are you going to send us that PowerPoint?
Yes, yep. And I
Thank
have
you.
that as just a document. It's like a 3-page document. So I'll send you that so that it's easier for you to just have, while you're reviewing these. And this is exactly what the template will look like. But again, I wanted to give you an annotated version so that you had something to go off of and help feel like you at least knew how to get started. And again, I am more than happy to help or meet with you or do even the first couple of, do an hour with you together drafting them. So please reach out and let me know. We just can't do that as a group because it's a public meeting. But I will certainly send that out to folks.
Thank you. Questions for Mary in regards to that? I do not see any. Oh, Paul.
So Mary, if I'm not on that list, if I wanted to assist with this, what would the timeline be? Like, when would you get me the information? And
That's a great question. It would probably be next week if you're interested and if you can email me and let me know how many applications you feel you have the capacity to support. That would be a great starting point. And then I would actually say right now, it would just be helpful to know how many you can help with, because there are a couple where I know I need some extra support, and I've already started to do this. I've looked at the applications all of you have evaluated, and I've already sort of put potential support members on some of these projects. If I knew you evaluated it and could, either be backup, or let's say the person who it's assigned to just can't get to it, which is totally fair. Then I can say, hey, Paul, would you mind helping to start this one? And all of those applications will be in a Dropbox folder. So I'll send you the template, or excuse me, the spreadsheet with all the assignments, and you'll be able to just click on whichever one you're working on, or if it changes, you'll have access to those too.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, I just want to say thank you. I think this is going to make it much easier and effective for us to weigh in support of these. So thank you for taking the time to be really clear with us and how we can weigh in. I think it's just going to be a really helpful tool.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. I'm glad it will be useful. And I can't reiterate enough how grateful I am that all of you are coming on to help support this and move these things forward. So whatever I can do to be helping you, please let me know. Again, anything will be faster than me trying to do all 43 of these contracts by myself, or excuse me, 45. So again, I do feel like this is a collaborative effort between all of us, and any help goes a long way. So please don't feel like you are not showing up to the extent you should if you can only help with one or none. I totally understand. And again, also really have just reached out to program grants members so far. And I know there's a lot going on. So.
Thank you. There's no other questions. If you could stay with us just a little bit longer, I think we have one other item left on the agenda. At least we can start the discussion on that today. And I believe you all received in the mail a draft copy of the Maine Recovery Council policy for urgent time-sensitive requests. Gordon Smith put that together for us, and I'm reminded that these urgent requests are for requests of applications that were received in 2024 that scored above average, but didn't quite make the mark when we distributed money. So I think you all got a copy of that, and I don't know if Gordon, you want to say a few words about that, and then we can start the discussion. Are you there, Gordon?
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
yes, I'm here now. So the Mary and I worked on this too, because after the grants meeting, we gave some consideration to whether or not we should look at not only the score, but the variance. But she can weigh in on why we decided that the variance issue we would deal with differently. So once again, I apologize. We've got 5 minutes to consider this. And I just remind you that if you adopt the policy, then Paul and I have about a 1-page petition that we prepared for the Recovery High School, which, in my opinion, this is the last day we can really act on it. If you don't adopt the policy, then we have no policy to govern how we would consider such a request, and so be it. So the policy that's been brought up here, you can see it deals with only applications we've already seen, already applications that have scored above average, and that meet 2 criteria. One, that they are determined to be urgent, and you can see the language that we've used. And secondly, that they also can address a specific population. And so it affects a fairly limited number of projects. We don't have good information today on how much money we have to spend, but it will be months, if not years, before all the money that we allotted in November really has to go out the door. So I'm not uncomfortable with adding this to the 43 projects. It actually turns out to be $582,000 that they need, and they have to do it to keep they need it now. They don't need the money now, but they need the commitment now, because the space at the university for the innovative residential part of the project can only be held for a short time. And even more importantly, they have to start recruiting about 5 staff people to do this innovative program at the alternative school. So but that's the first thing, is whether you're comfortable with this project, because other applicants are watching and could take advantage of it. But I present it to you for your consideration. I apologize. We've got limited time to discuss it.
Todd and then Brendan have questions. Todd, you go first. Oh, you muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Sorry about that. I was just prepared to make an emotion, but I'll wait for Brendan. He may have some points he wants to make.
All right, Brendan.
Gordon, my question is about timing of any petition, and I wonder whether you would consider, and this could be changed in the future once the council sees how this works. But in your first sentence there, 2 or more council members may petition, and I wonder if how you feel about adding there, not later than 2 weeks prior to the next council meeting, the council to ask for consideration. So
Sure.
and the reason is obvious, for public notice and for, to give council members time to evaluate the materials.
Sure. I don't know that that's going to work for my next, for the consideration of the high school.
Understood. Right.
But I don't object to that proposal. We could always waive it today if we needed to. So I would accept that as an amendment to the motion. That perhaps, well, I'm not making the motion. It looked like Sheriff Brackett was prepared to make a motion.
Maggie has a question.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if this would fall into discussion after the motion or similarly around wording what's here. I feel like it would be stronger if it could be 3 or more council members. Just one of the concerns I have is that people who are closer to council members may get elevated, whereas other organizations who may equally need that elevation may not have as much network. And so by leveraging 3, it ensures it's less of kind of personal influence and et cetera. And so I would suggest with our size of council, 3 would be kind of more appropriate. And then under section A, I don't know the right wordsmithing, but the way it's written right now, my perception is a lot of projects would fit point A in the sense that if we don't fund it, it won't happen. So how do we tailor the language under A to say if we don't fund it expeditiously, then it will not happen ever? Or some variation of that, because right now everybody's asking for money for something that for the most part is not happening. And so how do we tailor that to link it to the opportunity will never exist again or something like that?
So I have a couple things to say, and I'm going to let Brendan on this because we have in our bylaws, three or more members constitutes a meeting. So I need him to weigh in on that if that does. And the other concern I have is, um, I'm not sure. Again, we can only give money out as needed. Um, as we have it necessarily we need it. We don't have it, we don't have it. And I certainly, if we had it, wouldn't object to them coming back if that was the reason. The other piece is, have you considered instead of having two council people do it, that the request come through the executive director?
Well, if you're addressing that to me, Pat, number one, I had thought about three or more, and I have no objection to that. And even if it meant that we would have to pay attention to the fact that any three members that talk together are a meeting of the council, I get that, but I still think that actually three members would be a better number than two. In terms of, I realize that it's a bit subjective and we're going to have to kind of probably improve it as we go along. But I mean, I think the intent is that that if projects don't get a commitment, that they're not going to either ever exist, or the likelihood. We probably have to go and wordsmith it a little, maybe, so that it's like the overwhelming likelihood is that they won't get funded, in my opinion, not necessarily ever. That's a pretty high standard, but that they wouldn't be funded in a timely manner, because now is the urgency. In my opinion, we've still got 490 people dying every year. We've got a lot of needs out there. We're going to have to fill in some of the federal gaps. So I think we should allow this policy and amend it as we go along.
Okay, I have Brendan and Chastity.
Chastity,
Brendan?
I'm happy to wait until you go.
No,
Mine was
Chastity.
just quick and I may have missed it. Why did we take out the variance piece? Just thinking of some other ones that there was a big variance. Just from reading the comments, you could tell that that was just because people didn't understand the project, not that it didn't score well. They just didn't understand that type of work. So I'm just wondering why we removed that. And if you said it, I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to ask Mary, and I talked a lot about it this week, and I'm going to ask Mary to address that because she has a plan for how the staff would bring that to our attention.
I do, and I will just quickly explain now because I recognize the time. But Chastity, I am glad you brought that up because, as I've shared, I know with you, I feel very strongly that we address some of the discrepancies and uh, really address some of the discrepancies in scoring, because you're right, there are some applications. There's not that many, but there's a handful of them where um, there are two evaluators who scored it very strongly, and then there's one who didn't, and that really, swayed their average score because we only had three evaluators and we didn't take, the high and low out. And anyway, I feel very strongly that, now that Sarah Yasner has been able to actually start her work, and part of that is doing a grant review process, that as part of that, we'll be able to identify, some of the weaknesses in our application process. And through that, not only can we improve the next time around, but we can also identify if there is a need for us to have some sort of reconsideration for applications where, let's say, there was a significant variance. And I don't want to pick and choose what that number is. I'm also no mathematician, but I think through that process, we will really understand the ways in which we can best support next steps for some of these organizations. And if that means, again, reconsidering or having one of the council members who did evaluate, speak about why they scored it a certain way, I think that would be a really important process for us to go through and to honestly just like learn from together. And then through that, the staff over the next 6 to 12 months can bring any applications that have been identified as, having a certain variance or some anomaly in the process was identified. We can bring those to the council and say, hey, here, this is the reason why, and we would like someone to speak to the evaluation, and then the council can kind of decide from there. I do think that needs to be wrapped into a larger process around a grant review in general, but certainly needs to be something we address.
Thank you. Brendan?
I think a suggestion that I think could that I wonder whether would address Maggie's concern, and Pat, you raised the sort of 3 or 2 or whatever the FOA prohibitive number is of council members, like talking about business outside of council meetings. Would an alternative process or a more specific process be, urgent time sensitive requests go in to the executive director, who then distributes them to all of the council members and solicits whatever the number is, 2 or 3, from the council, who notify, the executive director that they're willing to, sponsor such a petition. And then, it can be considered at the next meeting. That way, the reason I think that's powerful is that, all of the urgent time sensitive requests are treated together the same. No one's preference by having a greater network. They all go into the executive director. They're all distributed. People can evaluate them and then decide for themselves whether or not they want to be, one of the 3, and I think 3 is a good number, petitioners. More work for the executive director, but more open process.
We have staff now. We have 2 staff members.
I actually like the idea of it going, of anybody, sharing the petition with the executive director, and then she can solicit other petitioners. And if there's 3 or more that are willing to have it considered, it would, with 2 weeks notice, it could go on the next council agenda. I'm fine with that.
And Gordon, to be clear, what I mean is what I mean is that the applicant directly submits to the executive director, not a council member.
Applicant, not a council.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think, I'm not necessarily opposed to that either.
So for the sake of time, let me think if I get this. So what the proposal is that the applicant would submit to the executive director. The executive director will then submit that request out to the board members, looking for 3 members who look at that and would sponsor that to go before the full board for a vote. Is that what I'm hearing?
I like that, Pat. It's hard not to see everyone's faces.
All right. Well, I'm trying.
Pat, that's what I heard.
Okay, so if that's what people are thinking they want, are they comfortable enough at this point to make a motion and a vote on that?
I think it's a little tough, Pat, until we see those 2 or 3 changes. They're pretty significant changes to the policy. So what I'm going to suggest, it's risky, but I think Mary can, and Brendan and I can make the edits to this policy that we've suggested.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like I'm going to kind of think that probably with these changes, it could be adopted at the next meeting. In the meantime, I will ask Mary to send out the petition that Paul and I had ready to present today. It's not fair to either the high school or any of you, really, we're already 10 minutes over what the meeting was supposed to be. I'm disappointed that they're not going to get an answer today, but they know we're working on it. And in the meantime, the Attorney General also has it under consideration. So I just appreciate, I'd appreciate you looking at what Paul and I are going to have prepared. It's just a page to say we think this is deserving of getting on the list right now, and we will take it. And I will ask that it be considered at the March meeting. I think it's the best we're going to do.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent.
All right. If everyone's in agreement with that, that will be our move. Gordon, thank you very much. Melissa, I'll take quickly because again, we're over. Melissa, you had a question?
I just will really briefly say I appreciate the gratitude around the process. I know it drags it out, but I think it's important. And I just want to say gratitude, Gordon, for continuing to work through this and I like the next steps.
Todd had his hand up too.
Oh, Todd, thank you. I can't see them all. Todd.
This is one of those times I probably should keep my mouth shut, but I'm also disappointed. I mean, we're all aware. It's too bad that we can't get this done. I think we're all in agreement of what we intend. I'm not at all concerned about some backroom changing of language that we don't agree with. And I think it'll be a shame if that project in Aroostook County is lost because of it. It's a project we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I had to say it. I'm not sure I'm sorry, but I had to say it.
I appreciate it. It is a project that holds dear in my heart, Todd. So I hear you, but I think for the sake of fairness and crossing those T's and dotting those I's, I don't think we have much of a choice but other than do it this way. But Todd, I totally get it. For Maine to have a recovery high school would be absolutely fabulous. And this project is a joint project with the university. So if they can just hang in for 30 days, we'll see what we can do here. And again, I appreciate your patience.
So Pat, I know we're over. Can I just make a suggestion to you? Is there a way that this could be taken up at the grants committee into either that we could sort of like we did the shelter? I know it's a different approach, but could we take this up and then come back in a month?
We could, and the university may take, we can only make a recommendation. We can't
Right,
vote.
we would make a recommendation back to the full
But
council.
the university may be able to feel comfortable with the fact that we made a recommendation.
Right.
So we can do that.
Might suggest we not do that because this is a totally new process and we haven't done the process we just figured out.
Okay.
And
right.
I'm not comfortable with that because we just sort of determined this process and I think we should just do it.
Okay, I'm getting my cart ahead of the horse. I'm with you, Liz.
No, I totally get it, Joe, but I guess I'm just gonna
So
say
I get just we're going to in a month finalize the urgent request process. So I got the horse. I retract that. I'll get my horses
and remember, don't get discouraged. Remember, we have approved 45 beautiful projects. So don't think, this one, 45 projects we have approved, plus the ones we approved last year. So again, we're moving and grouping. I want to wrap up this meeting. I want to share with all of you that I will not be at the March meeting. I'm on vacation watching my grandson play college spring ball in nice warm Florida, so I will not be there. Chastity will take over and have that duty as the vice chair. I will share with you that I think maybe we'll take a portion of the next meeting to talk a little bit about the Freedom of Information Act, just a brief thing in regards to the use of our communication and our emails, so that we know what we have to do in order to follow those guidelines. In regard to that, I promise it will be a short presentation, just so that we know how that works in communicating when we talk on emails and at meetings, and what is our guidelines in regards to the Freedom of Information Act. So just a reminder, any other items that you need on the agenda, please let me know. Do anybody have any last final words before we head out? I don't head out in the snow, but some of you may have to head out in that snow. Holly does. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's Augusta.
No, I'm actually in Booth Bay Harbor.
Oh, okay.
With true confession that it has rained since about 10:30. So it's going to freeze though. So
Oh, well, take
I don't
care
want
of all of you. Take care of all of you in the show. Holly, thank you for all the work you do in Augusta. Not an easy time. I
to live
appreciate
in
all of
AFA.
you. Thanks for the flexibility. Thanks for the extra time. Stay safe in the snow. And I'll see some of you at meetings, but other than that, I'll see you at the April meeting. Thank you very much.
Bye all.